Yeah, that one should go to Paul.
There was an extra one here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Get that to him. He said, please take them. They didn't want to take them home, so I said, fine, I'll take them for the planning commission. All right, we ready to roll? Phones off? All right, we're gonna call the March 12th meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission to order. And thank you all for being here. I know it's a lovely night. I saw a lot of people on the promenade who were looking at the lovely view and I guess the water going over the falls. So thank you for being here, because most people would probably rather be outside today. Anyway, we have one public comment card for an item that is not on the agenda, and tonight we have just two public hearings. I say just two. So we will go ahead and, Sue Ann, do you want to come on up?
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. Are you wondering if it's on?
It is.
I'm Sue Ann Imhoff, and I live on Roosevelt Street. And the Roosevelt Street issue has given me a couple of opportunities to come and talk about things that I really find to be very important. I'm a licensed mental health professional, and I'm currently employed for the Oregon Department of Corrections at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, which is the only women's prison in the state of Oregon. In my career, I've worked with persons having mental illness, traumas, substance issues, homelessness, personality disorders, criminal behavior, domestic violence, suicidal behaviors, and much, much more. I've had credentials to determine who can be held for involuntary psychiatric hospitalizations. I've worked with children and adults, families, individuals, and people from all social backgrounds. We're all aware of these issues here in Oregon City and the impact on our community's quality of life. How do we help these persons? How does Oregon City respond to a huge need? There are inadequate resources to help stabilize these persons, resources which are critical in minimizing relapse, and that all has an impact on domestic violence and children entering an overwhelmed foster care system. Resources are needed to help assist those who want to move off the street, stay off the street. Resources are needed to provide mental health treatment, hospital beds for those who need that level of care. Resources are needed to help those wanting to work, those who want an education, to have one, and those in need of medical attention to have it. 12 to 15% of our metropolitan area who are ages 12 through adult have used illicit drugs in the past month. And I've taken that data from SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Here are some of the characteristics of people who are in recovery: honoring commitments, keeping promises, telling the truth, having an interest in rebuilding relationships, having an awareness and an interest in bettering oneself, working on establishing routines, looking for jobs, showing interest in other people's lives, looking for ways to contribute and help with things, recognition of one's flaws and mistakes without making excuses, taking responsibility and being held accountable for one's own actions. I hope we can all agree that these qualities are ones that we value and would hope to instill in people recovering from any condition. We want to help, not contribute to harm. Given this, are we really wanting to just drop people off into residential neighborhoods without reputable professionals and thereby increasing their vulnerability and the vulnerability of the neighborhood? Does Oregon City really want tax-paying citizens to be easy targets? I do trust that your answers are no. So what organizations do we think will best help people to develop these characteristics? There are many proven organizations who work with people and who want to assist. From what I have seen to this point, Free on the Outside is not one of them. To this point, our neighbors have seen no trustworthy commitment, no history of keeping promises or telling the truth, no evidence of caring to form collaborative working relationships, and most importantly, we have not seen that they are able to accept responsibility or to be held accountable for their actions. I implore Oregon City to carefully and painstakingly consider the future of our neighborhoods and those who need assistance to overcome adversity as a major topic of future planning goals. So whatever happens with Roosevelt Street, and I'm not the one who's going to decide that, I am imploring the city to make plans so that in the future, what we do provide is professional services that really will assist people. We can begin with having licenses, codes, rules, and laws to hold everyone accountable, including those who promote their organization as to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate the
much.
opportunity.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes, please, Bob.
I appreciate your comments. My wife is a community health nurse, and I've heard this hymn for the past 53 years.
Okay.
And as I can glean from what you've said, that the responsibility for establishing some sort of a ongoing uniform treatment for these people should and has been exercised by the state up until, I won't say recently, because I don't know exactly when the date was that they sort of pushed that out into the community and mainstreamed this kind of treatment.
Yes, sir.
But how does one address what you just said to a small city like Oregon City that doesn't have the resources, but has apparently got the responsibility of this problem geographically, in the sense that people have located here? You know, and I sympathize with what you've said and what the people in Roosevelt have said. But even if we had a ton of money to address this, we don't have the expertise on staff, nor do we have the due process, so to speak, in our code to address it. So how would you respond to something like that?
Well, you've made many points, and there's a lot of questions that actually I could respond to.
I just do that to confuse the issue.
Well, right, so I'm going to see if I can respond. So I agree that the state has given so much responsibility to communities, and I will say this, given that I work for the Department of Corrections, I see the amount of people who are releasing to Clackamas County, and those are huge numbers, and I wonder, where are these people going to go? Sometimes people are released to the street, and you know, they really just give them a ride and dump them off on the street because there is no place for them to go. And so really, whose responsibility is it? Well, everyone argues. It's like the hot potato. Here it's yours, no, it's yours, here it's yours. My point is that really people do deserve help. Our communities do deserve protection and assistance. And I don't have a simple solution, but I do happen to know that there are many people in Oregon City who do have the expertise to help make these decisions. There's a lot of resources here in Oregon City, and so I'm just suggesting that, and to me, I don't know if this is the right place, that the Planning Commission really take this on because it's not going to go away. This is here with us. And yeah. I wish I could say, oh, here, let's just do this.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think these are some of the issues that my
Yes.
colleagues are wrestling with, you know.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think one of the points that you're trying to make is you have concerns, not to point out anyone in particular, but, you know, anybody can call themselves a group that helps somebody, and I think your comment without any credentials or documentation, that would be a concern, because, you know, what's to say that, you know, I don't hang my shingle out tomorrow and say, well, you know, I can help you do X, Y, or Z, and I'm now an expert.
Correct. Yeah, that's very well said. And I mean, so, you know, we have laws. The city has codes. I have a license. If I do something that harms someone, I can be held accountable. I can lose my license. So we have these, whatever we're going to call them. Some people are saying it's not a facility, it's a home, whatever we want to call it. If there is no way to hold people accountable, we don't know what damage they're doing to people, and we do not know whether they're doing what they're saying they're doing. I mean, which is great, you know, Oregon City has codes. I can look at those and we know like what fits in. I don't have the proper language for what you do, but I do know that many organizations, as you say, Ms. McGriff, can just put up a shingle and say, this is what I'm doing. And that is why people need to be licensed. That is why there need to be contracts or something so that we can hold them accountable. And I know that the need is great, so sometimes we just allow whoever is going to put up a shingle to put up a shingle, because then we don't have a problem, except I think we do have a problem.
Do you know if the state does any licensing or any of that? I know that, look at Portland, Multnomah County's got a problem, Washington County. Some of these people up here know personally, I've been dealing with it today. The hospital has released my sister 3 times, including today, because they don't have any facilities to help her with her mental illness. And so now it's up to the family to do something, but I don't know where to go to next. I wrote down your name. I don't know where to turn to next for help. And
for help on what issue?
Bipolar and everything else. But the hospital won't keep her, just
so you've
right
just
away.
asked a huge question, which I could give you a very long history of.
Yeah.
And
I'm just wondering if the state has any program that they license people
Here's
everywhere.
what happens. People who have no help, no assistance, they end up in prison where I work, and that's where they get treatment. We are the largest mental health provider in the state, and I could quote you numbers on that, as well as giving medical services, dental services. So if you don't have good insurance and you don't have the ability to pay, it's now Oregon
Go to
State.
jail or prison.
It's Oregon State Prison, yes, sir.
It's been that way for the last 30 years and just getting bigger.
The growth has just mushroomed. I mean, Oregon State prisons are so full, we have overflow beds and there's not enough places to house them. So, and you know that, I mean, you can see the people here in our own communities, it's grown, and there's not an effective way to deal with it.
Denise?
Yes.
I've got a question
Sure.
for Laura. Does this type of use require some sort of a business license to operate?
So the city, I can do just a quick 1-second summary for anyone who's coming in. The city received a code enforcement complaint for a property on Roosevelt Street. And there's actually a couple of complaints, but essentially what we're talking about is that the property had changed uses without proper permitting. And so we took a look at that, and the crux of what that code enforcement complaint was assessing if it was a care facility, right? So if there's training, treatment, or care happening on site, not with the organization in general, what is happening in this address. And so we did not find enough evidence or any evidence to determine that there was any care, treatment, or training happening on site. So within our code, we list those types of facilities as conditional uses, and so it would have to go through a conditional use permit. And we know that even through conditional use permits, that's just a process, and it has specific criteria because it's really assessing impacts for things like transportation and parking. It's not really looking at what we were recently talking about, which is who, what is the person doing to licensing? Yeah. So there has been a lot of research done with this. There's been a lot of coordination with a lot of people. I know that I have been in coordination with the governor's advocacy office or some office like that. That is over all of the licensing facilities at the state, and they were looking into it too. So city doesn't do licensing. We do business licensing. There's no business license needed for this facility. It's our determination because it's not falling under that threshold of any business happening on site. It does not require conditional use because there's no treatment care or training. It would be the equivalent of if you had a bunch of roommates rent a house.
But there is money changing hands somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But then there's a service. Somebody's
But they're-
providing a service
But
to.
that's-
They're
Service.
renting a room, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
the service isn't any different than if I rented my room out.
the city is,
Who are they renting a room from?
So the owner of the home has, so let's see, so Free on the Outside, if I'm
go ahead.
not misspeaking,
Go ahead.
has purchased, or they paid $10,000 down with the option to buy this particular residence. And they are going to charge residents, I forgot, I think it's $600 a month to reside there. So I'm not sure what question it was you were asking, Mr. Mahoney.
So what service?
I would say-
Isn't somebody being paid for a service?
We are looking at writing up a written determination that we could provide to the community, which would sort of walk through how we got to our determination. But our determination is simply looking at what is happening on site and land use wise. Is there sufficient evidence to proceed with a code enforcement case?
Thank you. And if I could just make my final statement is, well, maybe it won't be my final statement, but what I would just like to repeat is in this particular 523 issue is, you know, that's an issue, right? It's just one out of whatever's to come. And that's really what I'm asking for, is for there to be planning for this, because I can guarantee you, if you don't know yourself, this is going to be, it's going to continue. It's going to be a huge issue. And I am concerned, I mean, this is what I do for a living, other than the fact I live on Roosevelt Street.
Yeah, and just so you know, we've known about this, not even this particular, the issue.
Yes.
Because we're a county seat. So all the
Right.
parolees have to
Right.
come and check in with this.
Yes,
All
sir.
the county, virtually all the county mental facilities are here.
Correct.
They've started to disperse, so that, you know, that's the good news, is people don't have to bus in and then, you know, oh, I can't get my meds today, so I'll find some place to stay overnight so that I can get my meds tomorrow morning. All that, we understand that, and we've been working with that for, well, I was on city commission in '04, and that's, you know, the flag was waving at that point, and we've been, you know, trying to figure out a way we can partner with the county so that, well, one of the things that did happen is they dispersed a lot of their services.
Right.
So, but we do recognize that the city itself is in a unique position as being the county seat.
Yes, and I recognize that. And again, it's the hot potato. So, you know, the county can pass it off to Oregon City and et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly Walsh?
Good evening. I'm Kimberly Walsh, and I now live in the Berkeley Hills neighborhood close to Roosevelt Street. And I'm kind of late to the game, and I'm not very prepared as I like to be tonight, but I did have some additional comments and questions. And I've spent some time looking over the codes because I do understand that you have to follow the law and you can't discriminate just because of a certain type of people moving into your neighborhood. I do think that there could be arguments that it's a residential care facility, but I think you're already working and that's kind of been addressed. But you said that it would be the same as a bunch of roommates renting. And I see in the codes for conditional use, number B here, that bed and breakfast inns and boarding houses also fall under the conditional uses. But I couldn't find a clear definition in the Oregon City codes of what a boarding house is and how many people that would be. But to me, I would think that it would be people paying for a room living in a house. And so I'm kind of confused about that because it seems like even without all the other stuff and looking at who these people are, it still seems like it's a boarding house at its base level, which right here says, that's conditional use. That's not a permitted use for our zone. So just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I tend to agree with that. All right. Well, I know a number of you are here this evening for one of the two public hearings that we have. So we will get started with that.
Are we close with that one?
There wasn't a public hearing.
I didn't know if
No, there's no other slip, so we'll go from there. So we have a continued public hearing on L 17-04, proposed amendments to the development code sections of the Oregon City Municipal Code. And we continued this from the last meeting, and we are going to take it up again. And this is a legislative hearing. Oh, there she goes with the lights, and now we can't read anything. So there really isn't any site visit because it's all over the city, and I don't believe in, but I will ask, are there any potential conflicts of interest with anything that might be in this code, including in the proposed code amendments, including the, as it says, including lot averaging? Gentlemen?
Nothing other than what I've said on the record.
Okay. Bob?
None, not that I know of.
Zach?
Nothing to add.
Vern?
Your question was?
He said, does anyone have any potential conflicts of interest or conflicts of any sort regarding the proposed amendments to the development code sections of the Oregon City Municipal Code, including, it says, lot averaging?
I may have a potential conflict of interest.
Okay, you want to speak up because I can already see he's not hearing you.
I will explain some of the details.
Okay.
I own property in the city of Oregon City, which is my personal residence. Wife and I live there, so that should be no problem. The other property I own is not in the city limits of Oregon City, and it's not in the urban growth boundary. It is in the urban reserve program, which is the 50-year outlook.
So,
And in talking with the attorneys, a potential conflict of interest does not require a person to step aside or be recused for the meeting, because of the potential is lots of things have to happen before that potential conflict of interest turns into being a conflict of interest.
okay. So what I hear you saying is that based on your conversation with the city attorney, I think it was Bill you were speaking with, that at such time you're just saying it could be but as far as you're concerned, you feel that you could be fair and unbiased with regard to these issues.
Yes, and it's more than Bill's opinion. We've received some information from the Oregon Ethics Commission on cases, and they also point out that it is so remote of a possibility or potential that it may not even be considered by the Oregon Ethics Commission. And if we want a little more, Carrie is up to date on it and knows the law and what applies and what the recommendation is from the Oregon Ethics Commission.
So far, we don't, but as I had mentioned at the last meeting, what I was concerned about is that whether or not there was a conflict of any of us, and it's not so much that we had one or didn't have one, but unfortunately, we all live with the perception, and it's the perception of the public that usually ends up coming to the forefront. So before I'll pause on you, and then we'll go to you. Damon, do you have any conflicts?
None.
Yeah, and I don't either. Is there anyone that is interested or is wanting to challenge any of our declarations of conflict or not conflict?
Good evening, Lynn Anderson, Oregon City. I just want to go on the record that I wonder if Commissioner Johnson can be objective, because the piece of property that we're talking about is almost across the street from the white property that he previously developed. So it's not really like this is like out in the boonies somewhere. It's probably like the last piece of property left on Central Point Road that could be developed. And just how can you be objective when you could possibly stand to benefit financially in sometime in the future when you sell that property? So I just wanted to go on record with that. You can justify it however you want. I'm just saying that I do object, and I want it on record.
I believe that I could be objective.
Carrie, is there anything you'd like to add, or shall we move on?
We did reach out to the Oregon Ethics Commission and shared the facts with them and received an informal opinion that indicated that Vern's, the facts that presented did not even rise to the level of a possible conflict of interest, much less an actual conflict of interest. It is true that Commissioner Johnson's property is going to be developed in the next 50 years. But it is so speculative right now that this doesn't rise to the level of a conflict of interest. So I appreciate the comments, but it's not, it has to be brought into the metro urban growth boundary and would have to be annexed to the city. Those are two significant steps that are not presumed to happen in any short order. Just the same way, I mean, if Commissioner Johnson's property was in the county and not designated urban reserves, it could be someday brought into the urban growth boundary and brought into the city. So that was the analysis that went into it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
No.
So the objection is so noted. I guess as a question, is there any potential that our decision could be challenged based on an objection being filed?
You are making a recommendation to the city commission, so I would expect the answer is no, but I mean, it could happen.
Right, yep.
The only thought that I had on that, you said in the next 50 years, but dealing with Park Place and Beaver Creek and all the other ones, I know that with the governor's signature, anybody can annex in at any time now without a vote of the people. So would that be, I think
But
it has to be contiguous to the...
It's not only annexation, it's expansion of the urban growth boundary. And expansion of the urban growth boundary happened last in 2008, is my recollection, having not researched it recently. So it's been a while,
Okay.
10 years.
But do you have to under the new law by the governor, do you have to be within the urban growth boundary for a developer to
You do.
annex in?
Yes,
you
yeah,
do.
you can't just go out there and start doing
Okay,
stuff.
thanks. I didn't know I had to ask.
That's how everything in the South End Road area got sort of developed, because there was no standards, or it just kind of, well, just kind of happened out there.
Okay.
Anyway, okay. Well, that is so noted. I don't have to go through the quasi judicial land use review, but
Nope.
Kelly, we're gonna we're gonna stall for a couple of minutes. Kelly is setting up the timer. That's okay. We'll see if it works. If not, we'll have Mr. Clock over here. He's checking the clock.
Who's that?
And I do have a staff report.
Yes, yeah.
I note that the clock on Granicus is still on standard time too. It's not been switched over yet.
Yeah.
Oh.
These obviously are not Apple products, because Apple already updated everything. All right. Well, we will go ahead and reopen the public hearing on L1704, as I stated previously. And we do have some people to testify, but Kelly is going to give us an updated staff report.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Griff. Kelly Reed, planner with Oregon City. This is legislative file L1704 for development code amendments. This includes amendments to chapters 16 and 17 of the municipal code. The purpose of these amendments is to make revisions to lot averaging provisions in chapter 16 for subdivisions, along with some minor code cleanup and some efficiencies and correcting redundancies, essentially, in chapter 17 of the code. We went over all of the chapter 17 amendments that were, typo cleanups and efficiencies. We've added one since then that entails clarifying who has standing to appeal on a type 2 decision. Aside from that, everything else is the same as what we talked about last hearing. So I'm saving all of that stuff for the end if there are any questions about it, but the presentation today is just going to focus on lot averaging.
Yeah, I do have a question about that.
Okay.
But I thought, why is a type 2 appeal going directly to the city commission? Seems like there's a step missing. Not that I want to hear a lot of appeals, but that just does not seem correct to me.
Okay, would you like me to address that now or
Please.
after? Yes?
Yes, please.
I don't believe that we're changing the process. I think that type 2 appeals always go to the...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Type 2 reviews are what we call limited land use decisions. And that's a special statutory type of review that has to do with design review, and NRODs, I think, fall into that category, and things that are subject to where the use is allowed already. This is just design related issues. And so as a limited land use decision, the state law provides that we can process those applications in a more timely way by having notice and comment rather than a full-fledged public hearing. And so we are not proposing to change that expedited process for limited land use decisions as part of this review. That's not going to change. We could change it and provide for planning commission review and then a review to city commission if that was your desire, but I think it would be very difficult to meet the 120-day limit if we did a formal mailed notice, written comments come back, staff issues a decision, that decision is then appealable to the planning commission and then appealable to city commission.
My only comment is that if it's a type 2, it really should be appealed to the planning commission, not the city commission. But that's just my opinion.
And I I understand and kind of concur, but I would show that it already was straight to the city commission, so nothing's really changed other than clarifying who has standing.
That's correct.
So if they were removing that step, then I would definitely be, no. But since it's no change in that step, then I'm satisfied with it. Not okay, but I'm satisfied with it.
Yeah, I was looking at the change, which is on page 11.
But if you look at the struck out language, it
Yeah.
always went to city,
Yeah.
so.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll move on.
Well,
She has a
you
question.
were gonna do lot averaging. Do you want questions?
Let's do all the other stuff and then get to lot averaging.
That's what.
Yeah, that's what she was, that's what she was.
Oh,
Okay.
well, I have because we've already gone through all the other amendments, I do have, we're prepared to talk about that, but we were just gonna leave those in case there were questions, and my presentation focuses on lot averaging, so I would be moving straight to lot averaging right now.
Maybe not everybody is, even though maybe we've been through it, maybe the audience at home hasn't been through it, maybe there are people in the audience today
Okay.
that have not been through it,
And
so
I'm
I'm
still
just,
confused by it.
right, and there may be people who are still confused by it,
Okay,
so just making sure that we've, crossed our Ts and dotted our Is.
So do we want her to do her
Where's the black
presentation or
one?
ask
Sure.
the
Grade
question?
school.
Why don't you do her
Go ahead and do
presentation,
your
if we have other
presentation, then
questions,
I'll
and
ask
we'll
my
get there.
questions after.
Yeah,
okay. So I'll go ahead as planned.
Yes.
We've had a lot of work sessions and hearings, so we, I think, are, this might actually be our first hearing, but we've had a series of work sessions and reviews by committees. So the amendment to lot averaging standards, first I would just want to clarify what our current standards are. We have a few different residential zoning districts. We have R10, R8, R6, R5, R3.5. And when subdivision is proposed in those zones, they must meet the lot size of the underlying zone on average for the whole subdivision. And our code allows lot sizes to be up to 20% less than that average, that number, as long as that average is met. So for example, in R10, the average must be 10,000 square feet, and the lots within the subdivision can vary in size as going down to the minimum of 8,000, which is 20% less than 10,000, and they can be more than 10,000 as well, and there's no upper limit. So as long as that average is 10,000, then we can see that variation.
But to clarify on that, you can in that have a lot that's 28,000 or three of them, and that can skew the whole thing, so you can have some that are 5s and 6s.
No,
They can go with it.
the
That's what
absolute.
we've done that currently.
The absolute minimum is 20% less than the average, so
But we
only
just approved one of
20%
that
less.
several months back.
That might have been in a different zoning category, so.
They were going for R8.
Oh, they were going for R8,
Yeah.
that's right, even though they were R5s, okay.
Okay,
No, they weren't.
no, we wouldn't have approved that.
Sorry.
it's okay. We have a lot of other dimensional standards within our code for subdivisions and for lots within subdivisions, so I just wanted to list those out for you so you're aware. These are not proposed to change, so we have minimum lot width, lot depth, maximum lot coverage of buildings on a lot. We have minimum setbacks, minimum required densities for subdivisions, and then maximum block lengths. And all of these things affect how developers can kind of lay out their subdivisions and how property owners can arrange the lots. And none of these are proposed to change at this time.
And just on top of that, and the street layout.
Right, the maximum block lengths, yeah. So we've presented you with 6 options for lot averaging. You can choose to, focus on these 6 or, modify them in any way, but I'll summarize them. So the first one is to limit the lot size reduction instead of 20%, go down to 10, or make it 10%, and limit that to only 25% of total lots in the subdivision. So this is what we had originally presented as the amendment. So this is your option 1. The impact of that is that it could significantly reduce flexibility in layout of subdivisions, and it may result in conflicts with minimum density requirements.
And what's the positive side?
And the positive side is that it would result in less variation of lot sizes, so they would be more uniform because that limit, or the lower limit would only be 10% less than the upper, or than the average, and only 25% of those lots could even be less than the average.
So that was the original one
I
you
think you
came up with.
needed like a third column there. This is, yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of negative. And
Yeah.
so this is what was originally proposed, and then the other ones came up as other ideas as opposed to number 1. But who sets those minimum density requirements? Is that still Metro?
That's in the code.
It's our code.
80%.
It's our code, not
It's-
Metro.
And it is region-wide. I believe that every jurisdiction in the region has the minimum 80% density.
Okay, 80% of the
Of the-
land?
The number of lots that you can get in the subdivision, just on the basis of math alone, you're required to build at least 80% of that.
Okay, I think I understand that.
Anywhere in these changes, does it identify what we're trying to achieve through lot averaging?
Well, I think that's,
point, Bob.
for staff, it's been a little bit unclear, which is why we're presenting you with multiple options.
So we don't have a defined purpose of lot averaging.
I think we've heard a lot of,
What's been
for a variety of reasons.
So if I'm understanding you, you're asking what's the purpose of lot averaging, and Kelly's asking what is the purpose of our code amendment? What are we trying to fix with the lot averaging?
Yes.
Which I think are
Well,
slightly different.
if we don't have a purpose for lot averaging before we get involved into changes, how do we express this to the developer? This is what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, good question.
And what are we trying to achieve?
We're trying to allow flexibility and the ability for applicants to meet all of those other standards. Sometimes we live in a physically constrained world. We're looking for opportunities for infill development rather than expansion of the urban growth boundary. We're looking for ways that people can balance out prioritizing our transportation system, so making sure we have road connections as opposed to the lot sizes that meet. We get a lot of nooks and crannies, and so this amendment or this standard allows flexibility so that we can build closer to the density allowed. We know, as Kelly was talking about with this 80%, you can normally build X amount of lots when you do the math, but then when you apply it to a map and you meet minimum lot widths and depths and put in those street connections, you get these extra little spaces that are hard to fit lots into at that minimum lot size. So lot averaging has done quite a bit to help us make sure that we get closer to the maximum density that we can do. It doesn't provide any additional density, it just helps us get closer to what's already allowed in the code.
But doesn't it also, the whole purpose of this the reason it came up, we've had it in our guidelines, but it came up because of the fact that some people were using such huge properties, and when they were coming in for R8s, it was going for actually R5s, wasn't it, to try and limit some of
We had
that?
lots of complaints.
So this is what Kelly was asking.
Isn't that what we're heading towards, those, to eliminate that kind of a crisis, so to speak, for the neighborhoods that are
I don't know really where we're heading, so that's why we did 6 options. And based off the problem we were trying to solve, we can pick which option. We've heard concern that the small lots are too small, so there's options just limiting how small they are. We've heard that there could be too many, so there's options with limiting how many. We've heard about the conflict with the power line easement, so we have a code amendment that says if that's the problem we're trying to solve, here we'll explicitly say that no power line easements can be included in density. So depending on what the problem is we're trying to solve, there's a solution there, we hope. We've had a few of these meetings, and I feel like we've asked quite a bit to try and figure out what that problem is, and we all may have slightly different problems, so I'm unclear as a commission what our problem is we're trying to solve. So there's a menu of options. We're certainly not recommending all 6 of them be implemented, but I'm not sure if the problem was the big lots were too big or that we were using the utility easements or what the problems were.
What we heard from the community was that there was a compatibility issue and that they felt that there was some ability to really kind of, it was a get around the code. So if you had 8,000, you could go down really small, which is what I heard when they were here was that what they were objecting to. But, you know, Bob, to take the devil's advocate view, what the real crux of this is that in the last 20 years, all the really easy parcels have been purchased and developed. Now we've got basically the dregs, and people are trying to figure out how to develop these. You know, I mean, in my world, we wouldn't be developing near or power line easements because I think, unfortunately, it's been shown in studies that those things cause people problems. And, you know, you can go whichever thing you want, but
I like my five-legged dog.
you like your five-legged dog? Yeah, that's part of the problem. They got a lot of five-legged dogs going on around here. So, you know, we've got issues with some parcels that are possibly could be considered to be unbuildable, that maybe somebody's trying to do something on them and maybe they shouldn't be built on. I don't know.
Or they're trying to use them, they'll average this
Right,
lots to
right,
make
yeah.
them
I mean,
smaller.
Well, I don't think that's I don't think that's our responsibility.
No, it
I
isn't.
think that's up to the property owner, the prospective buyer, to do the research that they need to do on the
Right.
lot in order to find out whether or not it's buildable, what kind of
Right.
issues are on there.
But it somehow got dumped on us, though.
My bottom line is that I think that there has to be a degree of certainty on the size of lots that are in a base zone. If it's R8, it should be 8,000
Exactly.
square feet. If it's
Yes.
R10, it should be 10,000 square feet. Yes, perhaps there should be a little bit of
Variance.
variance to the size of the lots on a few of them if there's a problem with the overall parent parcel size to make them fit and that kind of thing. But under no circumstance should they be, what we have been seeing before.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a problem with a portion of the lot that's not developable. That's the exception. What this has become has been the rule.
Yeah.
And we heard from an applicant who said, well, I'm going to do it because I can do it. You know, I personally did not appreciate that, professionally or personally. It was a little like in your face.
And just to be very, very clear, I know I said it and I'll say it again just because this does not provide extra density. The density is still the same. This is just allowing people to fit in the density in the physical location. You don't, if you could get 10 lots before, you can never get 11.
Well, a lot of it has to do with where you place that smaller lot. Like Denise said, compatibility. You want to put your smaller lot against my 10,000 or 15,000 or 12,000 square foot lot and back two lots up that are smaller than that. That's a compatibility factor. It's perceived by the property owner. And they don't question it. It's perceived almost like an increase in density. So, and we both know that the density hasn't increased.
Right, but it's perception.
It's perception.
One thing I
Getting
forgot to
killed by
answer when I answered your question about why we had this was because at the time, so we adopted lot averaging, it's changed over time, but we adopted it in 2004 originally. And a lot of the reasons was to provide variation in lot sizes. And the thought was that you can have a community with perhaps different housing types or lots or price ranges, and that you could provide a place where lots of different people could live and it would be interesting.
Yeah, it's not happening though.
Whether it's not or not, but this is part of,
By holding the line on these lot sizes, I don't think that we're advocating for this Euclidean cookie cutter style of subdivisions that have repetitive size lots to the horizon. I don't think we're looking at that at all. What I do want, though, is a degree of predictability of lot sizes, regardless of what the density of those lots are. If you do want to do R3 or R6 or R whatever, then that should be in a package where it is appropriately located in wherever you want to put it. I guess the other thing this opens a whole other issue, but I kind of feel bad that the PD has gone away in this,
I'd like that.
because I think that actually provides for a variation in lot size and some creativity as well. But I just think that, you know, if you're going to provide, or if you're going to propose a certain zone, then the zone should, the lot size should represent what's being described in the zone, I guess.
So what Paul is talking about is a plan unit development, so you heard what we said was PUD or PD, it's a planned development.
But
And we do have some in Oregon City.
So
we do
in a planned development, you can trade density and put lots on in exchange for some meaningful and useful open space. So if there's a wetland, or if there's, you know, maybe a large passive piece of open space, or even a park, you can reduce the lot sizes to make up for the size of the park that the developer is going to give up.
And you can achieve that now with our current code through the master plan process.
Okay, great. That's, yeah, however you get there, it's fine.
One point on, I think there's probably a couple of ways to get to smaller lots, if you want to call it that, more density. We can have these 10% reductions, wipe those off, or wipe off any smaller numbers of lots below the density. But by doing that, you still leave open in the code book that if they're starting at an R10, they can apply for a zone change and get down to 8. If they start at an 8, they can get down to a 6 or a 5 or so. I don't know if we're trying exactly what we're trying to do. Are we trying to not have so many lots? And compatibility, if you say from 10, 8, and 6 are still in the same low-density district, zoning district. So that kind of tells me that you already allow 10s, 8s, and 6s commingled in an area. And it's how you get there is through a zone change, or do you get there through the reduction or limiting the amount of reduction or increasing the amount of reduction to give you that flexibility within a subdivision that has constraints, you know? The raw land you start with is whatever shape it is and dimensions. Then you put roads, connecting roads in, and you create another subsection of land within that subdivision that is bounded by roads. And then the flexibility comes by having a 10% reduction to allow you to put 2 small lots in some section to use the land better. So it is kind of a puzzle to know exactly what we're, at this starting point, what we're trying to accomplish.
So you're looking at this through the prism of the comprehensive plan, in that they assign high density, low density, medium density, and so there are maybe 3 or 4 zoning categories that fit in each of those larger categories.
Right.
And so you're thinking that that's okay. If you have a low density, you could have R10, R8, and R6 in there.
They're grouped together, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think unfortunately what has happened with the current application of lot averaging is that they've become de facto zone changes. I mean, we've got some that came through that have got really tiny, small lots, and I don't think in our wildest dreams we thought, or the previous planning commission thought, that that's what was going to happen with it. I think, again, the reduction should be the exception, not the rule. If there's something going on that truly meets the standard, and it's you know, something that there's no control over. I mean, the control is you buy the lot, you know what you get when you're, like you said, they buy the lot. If it's got a power line easement, you know that when you buy it, and or whatever it is, you know, the sinkhole or, you know, the crater or whatever it is, they know that going in. And speak.
As somebody who was on the city commission in 2004 and voted about the original
yes, and you
thing,
were very good at telling us that.
You're the one.
the objection I raised at the time, it was originally explained that, look, we're building out to the fringes. We've got canyons, we've got weird, strange lot sizes, we've got roads that go diagonal. there is no grid structure in Oregon City because of our topography. And that was why we needed this variation. I completely understood that. And then the other comment was, and we want to avoid the ticky-tacky little houses all stacked up in a row, so this way we can have, you know, big houses and little houses and houses next to each other and houses, you know, with joined yards so they can play volleyball or whatever. I said, well, that's a concern to me, because I said, what's to prevent somebody from coming in to an R10 zone, building 8 R8s and having an R40 to balance it out? And the response I got is, they'd never do that because that's undevelopable land they're throwing away.
Yeah, guess what?
And I was like, you know, depending on where they put that 40,000 square foot lot, they, you know. So I voted for it because of the assurance that developers wouldn't waste land, and that that there was a definite and real need, because we've got canyons, we've got cliffs, we've got, you know, slides, we've got lots of weird topography. And so when I look at the lens of what are we trying to fix, to me, what we're trying to fix is the 8,000 square foot lots and the 40,000 square foot wasted lot to get the balance, the, you know, the abuse of the system. I have no problem with there being a variation in the lot size. I just want to make sure that it isn't, you know, lots of tiny lots and the McMansion to balance it out. So looking at all these options, that's the lens I'm looking at it through. I absolutely agree there needs to be variation. How big the variation is, that's my concern.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, same here.
Can I
go with-
follow up on that?
Yes, please.
A newer area, and I'd heard,
Scoot up.
I'd heard some comments that properties that have been built 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago on a rather large lot, it wasn't a large lot at that time, it could be in that 2 acres or under category, and it's still 2 acres and under with one house on it, or an acre with one house on it. And if we were to say our mission is to get rid of small lots, we would really be cutting those people off from very much use of that extra land to build another house. And it may be a low-income house or an affordable house, that if we take the code to the point that we don't allow that, we get ourselves in a deeper hole on having housing variety that is affordable for all levels of income. So we, you know, it's easy to say, let's make them all small or let's make them all big, but how does that play out in the long run when you get to the infill, which people seem to think we're at that level right now? We're going to have to find spaces between existing houses, whether we go as far as Portland with 2 or 3 little tiny houses on it. I don't know that I'm ready to go that way, but if they can build a $2,000 or 2,000 square foot house on 4,000 or 5,000 square feet next to another house, it looks reasonably well. If we go too far in one direction, we're going to cut that off.
Well, and just in response to that, they just need to have the proper zoning. And I have, you know, if somebody wants to put 25 lots on an area and R8 fits, then great. I don't want them to come in and put 23 R10s down 20% and 2 R40s to balance it. Come in with an R8.
I agree.
And work with an R8.
I will agree, but if you're in an acre or 2 acres or less, you don't have a leftover of a 30,000, 40,000 square foot lot. you're trying to maximize housing on the land that's there. So
But Vern, you're
there's
talking-
there's no need to put a giant lot on those or any place unless there is a restriction of some sort, power lines, road easements, geographic areas, overlays, and all of that. That is what's, I think, driving the mega lot. One mega lot with little micro lots.
But I mean, Oregon City isn't creating 2-acre lots. These parcels that are larger are coming in from the county in the urban growth boundary. Those weren't created by us, those were created, I mean, I say us generally, I'm talking about this local government. They were created by different local governments, so I don't see that that's an issue. If you know, I totally agree with what you're saying. Nobody's building a house and then putting a house that's affordable on it. If you look and see what's being built today, it's affordable to somebody, but it's not affordable to everybody. So we can't, I don't want to use that as a reason to say, well, gee, if we don't allow this, we can't let somebody build an affordable house. They can't afford to build an affordable house because we're being told that this is what people want. Well, I don't really think that's what they want, but you know, that's what's available.
Well, but just to add to that, fitting more homes within a smaller space can lend itself to affordability for services, for houses, for all of that, including transportation.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. I don't think any one of us are looking for one lot size over another, but what I really want to see is the analysis that's associated with the lot size that's being requested, and again, the degree of certainty on what lot size that actually is, so that we can know what kind of a traffic impact that is, or what lot size is, or how the subdivision even lays out, or the design, or how the neighborhood looks.
The one thing I've noticed that we're not really addressing in this lot averaging is the impact it has on the neighborhood street system. And I equate that with public safety, because if we're now engaged in infill in some of these really problem lots and parcels, some of these collector and residential streets that we come up with in terms of their design is less than ideal. We've got some real challenges. The one thing that we consistently talk about is traffic, and the impact that lot averaging and zone changes and density all combined have on our transportation system is the biggest problem we have. Where's it going to collaterally impact on an intersection a half a mile away? And you do something here, you're going to get impacted over there. Mm-hmm. So we've got to address that, and we've got to keep that in mind when we look at these zone changes. And I know that lot averaging isn't going to increase the density, but we've got to look at the impact that these street systems in these subdivisions have on our transportation system. And I think they're related. They go hand in hand. And what bothers me is when you have a zone change that maybe skips a zone, and then you throw in lot averaging on top of that, and you bundle that with an annexation and a zone change and a subdivision. And frankly, when I go out into the parking lot, I have a hard time finding out where my car is. My head's swimming so much. So I'm thinking that maybe we ought to look at these annexations and these zone changes and these site plans individually as a planning process and say, hey, hold the phone here. We're just going just a little too fast here. What's this going to do? How's this going to impact the neighborhood? Because that's what we're charged with. We're not charged with lot averaging per se. We're charged with the big picture. How's this going to impact a neighborhood? Compatibility. Because when you fill this room and people are screaming at you, you know, I mean, that's an impact. That has an impact on the planning system. That has an impact on my thought process. And I think it has an impact on the due process, the the findings of fact and things of this nature. So it's all combined, and I don't mean to, you know, throw spaghetti up on a wall and see what sticks, but we got to keep those things in mind, and it bothers me to see some of these things get bundled, and they almost confuse the issue to the point where it's difficult to, what did we just do? What are we being asked to do, you see?
Can I follow up on that? I tend to think sometimes these bundlings are a time limitation thing, or try to save time. And I agree with you, we could split them up into 3 things, but if we go to the applicant and says, okay, you can only do one step at a time in your application, and they have lots of meetings for each one, and you have your design team and your legal team and the whole thing, and then as soon as they get step 1 approved, then they have to do it all over again, and the other 120-day periods and all that. Can we compromise a little bit and the applicant can do 2 or 3 combined, but the hearing process we use is we segment them into individual segments within, but the whole thing has the 120-day or whatever the time frame is, so they don't have to just parade their support staff through here 3 times to get what they want to do. Do one application.
I understand that.
We consider it separately.
I don't know that we can do that, because if they come to us with 3 items as an agenda item, we have to approve all 3. We can't go, oh, we like the annexation and we like the lot averaging, but we don't like your zoning, so we're gonna say no to everything.
That's
You know,
the
and
only,
yes to
that's
these
the only
2.
choice we have right
Yeah.
now, and I don't like that.
But,
But I agree, separating them out some way that we don't have 4 items all at one time.
Well, you know
because-
you're not going to approve a subdivision if it's not annexed into the city.
No,
You know
you've got to
that.
start at the front
Yeah,
and work your
yeah.
way through the process.
But if you put it individually on an agenda, I think it would be a lot better for the
Some-
planning process, so to speak.
Right, it's our own internal process more so than the
All right, so I'm going to bring the
applicant's.
conversation back around to
Lot
the
average.
chart, 1 through 6. We
Thank
have
you.
these, we can say we don't like any of them, we like all of them, we like none of them. Where do we want to go with this?
okay, well, first, are you done, Kelly?
Bless
I
you.
can summarize the rest of them if you'd like.
Please.
I think
Yes.
we pretty much see them right here, but
Yeah.
thank you.
But give us the positive aspect as well, please.
Yes, the impact there is shown positive and negative impacts. So option 2 would be to limit the reduction to 25% of total lots, keeping the 20% size reduction option. So this one's likely a little bit more flexible than options 1 and 3, and it will result in fewer lots that are below the underlying zone minimum, so only 25%. Option 3 is just limiting the size reduction to 10% of the underlying zone. So you could still have a lot of them that are under 10%, but 10% would be the maximum.
Say that again. You
This-
have a lot of them that are under.
You could have
You mean like
a
987?
majority of the lots could be 10% less than the zoning average if you balance it out with larger lots, right? And so the lot sizes will be more uniform, and it's less likely to result in conflicts with minimum density. Option 4 would be, keeping our existing lot averaging, but changing the way we measure or calculate net developable area to begin with. So the power line easements, when they're part of the net developable area, that kind of leads to a lot of these larger lots and being able to count that power line easement area in the calculation to then balance out smaller lot sizes elsewhere in the subdivision. And so this option would address the issue when we have power line easements on these sites. But there are a lot of subdivisions that don't have power line easements, and so it wouldn't affect any of those subdivisions.
Why are you only limiting this to power line easements? What about properties that have, for instance, in the Park Place area, I'm very familiar with an area that has major unstable slopes. I don't want that counted as part of the developable area because you can't develop it. So why should you get credit for it?
So we already that's already removed. Yeah. So we have a formula for steep slopes. 35% or greater slopes count for nothing.
Okay. And what else is not counted besides steep slopes?
So if you're in the natural resource overlay, you can only count 1/3 of that area as your in your net developable area. And we take out from net developable, we also remove all dedicated public right-of-way and all infrastructure like stormwater ponds.
Ponds, okay.
Denise, I got a question.
What about like if there's a canyon or something? Would that come under?
Well, that would probably be in the
steep slopes?
geologic hazard, and so,
okay.
yeah.
Bob has a question for you.
Bob, you have a question?
Yeah. Carrie, what kind of legal ground are we on thin ice, or are we pretty stable on that, eliminating power line easements?
When I expressed concern about it before, my concern was in evaluating the limitation in developability in an easement. And in other words, our office would review an easement and determine whether or not land was buildable or not. And that gave me some concern. If we use language that was just no power line easements, then it's either power line easement or it's not a power line easement. The character of the buildability of land within that power line easement doesn't matter. And so I'm less, so I would support the idea of this if this is where you decided you wanted to go, because I believe we can define the term power line easement to be clear and objective.
Well, let me make a further statement in that, having done a lot of research on the BPA, Bonneville Power Administration power lines, you cannot build anything, no structure whatsoever can be placed within those. They are not considered to be a buildable area. That's why the law and the statute and the federal statutes are that way. Portland General Electric and PP&L also have very similar regulations that you can't. We had someone years ago wanting to propose a play area that had no structures under where Claremont Way is, and we denied it, told them that we weren't going to approve anything because even a play structure was considered a structure. And we said, no, we did not think it was a great idea to have children playing under BPA's, and of course BPA vetoed it anyway, so the city had the first stab at it, but no, you can't, they're not buildable. They're just, it's the law. Period.
I think that's why the word is power line easement instead of utility. We talked about this before as utility easements, and utility easements could include a much broader range of
Well, we have some
easements.
utility easements, we don't allow people to put anything on top of them either.
I appreciate that.
Because if you need to get to it, you got something on it, then you've got major issues. So sewer lines, water lines.
But they can still build and use that turf
Not on top of it.
They can play frisbee on top of it.
Well, sure, but that's not a structure.
It can be part of their property line
Yeah.
without impacting their property.
Right, they just can't build anything on it.
They, most of the power line eastments have got fences and stuff along them, so they're already kind of segmented.
The other point,
So going back to the
All right,
list.
so now we're at number 5.
Thank you.
Number 5.
Option 5, we did,
pitch
we heard some folks describing the problem as the lots
I'll get
next
you
to
after she finishes
existing
this one.
subdivisions are the smaller ones, and then putting them next to
Big one.
10,000 square foot lot wasn't necessarily compatible in their opinion, and so option 5 addresses that a little bit. It excludes properties on the perimeter of the subdivision from being less than 10% below the underlying zone. So the lots on the edges would have to remain closer to the average. And so this would be likely to allow fewer lots in those smaller developments. I think one of you mentioned earlier, What about the infill subdivisions, the small, 4, 5, 6, 7 lot subdivisions, where all of the lots might be on the perimeter, or, a majority of them. So it could reduce flexibility for those infill subdivisions that the Planning Commission doesn't tend to see because they're all reviewed at a staff level, but we do get quite a few.
You're talking
of
about 3
those.
lots or less?
So 4 subdivisions start at 4 lots, and I just checked the numbers from the last 2 years, 2016 and 2017.
It's always 3.
We had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 subdivisions total. 4 lots, 4 lots, 5 lots, 6 lots, 8 lots, 11 lots, 12 lots, and then the larger ones were 28, 77, and 98. So you might have seen some of those come to you as zone change subdivisions.
Why
But
didn't we see any of the 5 or over?
the ones that were 4 through 12 lots probably didn't come here because they're type 2 limited land use decisions, as Carrie described.
If there's not a zone change and
Right.
they can fit,
No,
then
right. And some of those may have utilized lot averaging. We didn't pull all the numbers on that, but when you're only doing a 4 lot subdivision, the perimeter option could be difficult.
They should know that going in.
And then option 6 would be to address those oversized lots, to limit the largest lot size to 3 times the underlying zone minimum. So in the R10 zone, 30,000 would be your maximum lot size. And then therefore you could reduce the other ones,
Yeah,
have
I don't like that.
less ability to reduce your other lot sizes.
I don't like that.
Well, in the case of Ainsworth Estates, I would hate to limit, I'm not a fan of the 30,000 square foot lot size, but I would hate to limit myself or limit us in our ability to
So that
have
was an
something like
exception.
that happen as an exception.
That was a National Register district.
Right, but I don't want to have any code that would, go in the way of that. I think what we ought to do is put a pin on what our favorite ones are at this point.
Yeah.
well, do we want to hear
I'll
from
make the decision for everybody.
I think that the Ainsworth Estates and the Warner Parrott, the Locust Farm properties are exceptions.
Right.
You have historic properties in them that were placed in a certain location, and I think that there needs to be some flexibility with regard to those properties. Most of the stuff we see aren't that.
Right.
Isn't that? So
Right.
I have no problem looking at those in a different way because the goal of those were to save the historic resource.
And I'm just
allow for
advocating for
development.
code language to support that for our.
And I
ability
think
to
our
do
code
that.
language does support
Is it?
that, because
Okay.
we had an 1.5 acre lot, and I forget how big the one with the Locust Farm property is, but they're larger.
Yeah.
And then everything else complied with the rest of the code, so
Okay.
it was, I don't think that was an issue. I think, again, something like that's an exception. We're not seeing anything that's coming up that we've seen that to me rises to that level of exception.
Perfect.
I'm anxious too to pin it down, but should we hear
Vern's got a
these
comment,
people first?
yes,
Okay.
and then we'll hear the people.
Okay, my comments are back to the larger than the power line easement, but other easements, sewer lines and this type of thing. The prime example that jumped to my mind on sewer lines at the hotel on Washington and 17th became a major factor in how they orient the front elevations and the whole thing, because they couldn't set it along Washington because there was a 30-inch utility
But that wasn't a subdivision.
underground. But I mean, it's not a subdivision,
Yeah,
but
I don't think
the easements can come back to haunt you in many different ways as to how you can develop it. That was not, the same thing with Claremont Way, the Joanne's and all of that. They got lots of parking underneath the power lines there, and those, and again, they're not residential, so to speak, but they're trying to, I think, get some usage out of the thing instead of letting blackberry vines take over.
Good point.
Yeah, I don't park over there.
Denise,
Okay, yes, sir.
what about limiting the size of a subdivision that could qualify for lot averaging? X number of lots. Like you wouldn't qualify for 4 lots. Make it 10.
I don't think
I don't know
that,
how that would work.
Why wouldn't that apply?
Oh, I'm not saying it doesn't, I'm in my head trying to spin it.
Well, my point being that the larger the subdivision, the more flexibility you could incorporate into the design, because really that's what we're talking about, is the design of a subdivision in terms of lot size, where those lots are going to be located, i.e. design. And, you know, you're going to have much more flexibility in where you're going to put those lot lines with a larger subdivision. You get into a subdivision that's 7 or 8 or maybe even 10. You know, it's pretty straightforward and conventional as to how those lots are going to lay out. But lot averaging would be applicable on a subdivision of 20, 30, 40. Since we don't have planned unit development ordinance.
well, but what you're saying then is, if I have 10 lots, then, and I'm in R8, it's gonna be R8. And there isn't any flexibility. But to me, it's those little lots that need the flexibility, especially based on what you said. The little lots are gonna need to be able to be 20% smaller in order to get 3 lots instead of 2 huge lots. Whereas the big areas, the 20-acre ones, have, you know, plenty of room to shift a road 6 feet left and make 4 lots fit in the block or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right?
Right,
But you think
but
that
you were
this-
saying that lot averaging should only apply to the big lots.
Yeah, but you think it's needed at the smaller subdivision.
Well, I think they've got less flexibility. So if anywhere it would fit there, and that's, I think, the problem with trying to limit it by, you know, because depending on where they build, you know, canyons, whatever, even on a bigger lot, so.
Okay.
But I think it's a good point to consider, should you allow some of this on sizes of proper raw land that you start with? Be a little more flexible in small lots possibly, I think is what Damon is saying, is where the flexibility would come in to the advantage. In those, if you can get one more lot, when you're talking of 5 to start out with, or one less lot, that's a pretty big percentage drop. Whereas if you're at 30 plus subdivision lots, you lose a lot or you gain a half or whatever, you know, that's not the percentage of hit.
3% rather than 20%.
Right.
It makes me worried
So
how
it's-
you administer.
Pardon?
It makes me worried how you administer it. I imagine.
yeah.
if you're-
Agree.
Oh, yeah,
agree with
well,
that.
but that's why we have such a sharp staff here that can figure that all out.
They've got
Yeah.
plenty of extra room on their plate for that.
Yeah,
I didn't say they had plenty of time, but
they have a lot of time.
I
lots of
really
time.
appreciate the conversation about what it is we're trying to solve and being thoughtful of in this case or that case. Given the conversation that you've had tonight, the staff's recommendation is to go with number 6, which is to limit the largest lot size to 3 times the underlying zone minimum, because it sounds like the concern is the predictability and the variation between the very smallest and the very biggest. And you can certainly do whatever you want, but given sort of the discussion tonight,
3
that
times is
seems
too
to
big.
have solved that seems to be the key to solving whatever problem we're trying
But I
to.
think that's not everybody here.
Nope. Yeah, I don't like
Not even
that.
close.
And it is clear and objective, and that's what we.
Yeah,
always
I do like that.
As long as
I
we're
like
not
the idea.
increasing the density, which has been the whole concern.
Well,
Yeah, well,
That underlying zone controls everything.
yeah, well, I think 3 times is too many times, but that's my just personal opinion. Anyway, so let's call up some of our friends out in the audience and see what they have to say and see if that moves the needle anywhere.
Are you sure they're our friends?
Yes, they are. So Debbie, come on up. Is it Darusha? Darusha. And Mike, come on up. And again, thank you so much for being here. Oh, you get to go before him. Just say your name for the record again.
My name is Debbie DeRusha. I sent a longer version of this
We do have
3-minute
that.
version to you guys, so this
And
is
thank you for
my
that.
cookie cutter part of this. So I'd like to read it. My name is Debbie DeRusha. My husband and I have been residents in Oregon City since 1993. We own several properties adjacent to our primary residence, including 2 developable small acreage lots. We are good stewards of our property, and we are proud to call Oregon City our home. When we purchased our first home, we were amidst farms and fields. Today, we are surrounded by hundreds of single-family homes where young families enjoy great schools and rural affordable lifestyle. Now, parents of those same families are moving to be near their grandkids. The current lot averaging code would allow 4 new homes on the small acreage lot that we bought specifically for that purpose. An existing house placement requires us to apply lot averaging rules to gain those homes. Any reduction to that code will impact our ability to realize that plan. We watched the related videos of commission meetings. Clearly, citizen complaints have been the cornerstone of the code modifications, but the exact complaint is unclear, as we've seen tonight. We consulted with Laura to get clarification. She referred us to the newly inserted language. The 6 options now proposed reinforce the need for clarity in the intended outcome of the code change. So without a specific proposal to address, these are our comments. Too many times we see rules changed for the masses because of the actions of a few. If code change is necessary, then smaller infill developments like ours need to be part of the equation. There are many small acreage sites in Oregon City whose owners don't know this code change will affect them. We ask that the city's solution not inhibit smaller sites from being a viable component of our city's resources. Smaller developments need to conform with all development codes and their exorbitant costs. Losing just 1 lot could mean the financial demise of an entire project, and this is the case for us. Without financially sound development potential, the only allure that a small acreage holds for an owner is a nice big single-family home or a flag lot. The city loses the density, tax revenue, and affordable housing. We've become less emotionally impacted by the development sprawl over the years. It happened on the west side, and once Oregon City was discovered, we knew it was inevitable. We are pleased that Oregon City is an attractive place to live. The commission chairperson is right when she says we are a unique and proud community. We should welcome those who want to be part of our evolving city, new and extended families and job seekers alike. We are requesting a continuance of this process to allow more time to analyze options and explore consequences. We feel it would be prudent to solicit further comments from other small acreage owners. Our goal would be that the current code remains the same for developments with 10 or fewer lots. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike? Oh, does anybody have any questions?
No, it's very straightforward.
Yeah,
I
thank you, appreciate it. So, you know, it's basically the luck of the draw. So whatever the development code is, the time you want to develop, that's the one you get to follow. You don't always get to get the one that you want. It's just whatever it is, it's applicable.
Well, she wants the one that we've got.
Yeah, well. Michael, how are you?
I'm good. Mike Mitchell, I'm an Oregon City resident. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'll start by saying that probably will get me tarred and feathered, but I actually am pro-growth. I think that's what keeps our city livable and exciting. The trick, and that's why you guys are all up there, is the balance between having rules that allow the developers the flexibility they need to make this Tetris game work with streets and the weird lots that are left and so forth, balancing that between the impact on the neighbors. There's always going to be impact on the neighbors. There's going to be impact on everybody half a mile down the street when the cars come down as well. But we just have to make sure that that's reasonable. And Mr. Mahoney, to your comment, that at least that's my lens on what we're trying to do here, is get to a balance that still allows the developers to hit the density target that they have to hit, but doesn't allow these de facto zone changes that were referred to either by Commissioner Johnson or Commissioner Maybe, I'm not sure, where in effect we ended up with an R6 when you were asked to approve an R8. So that's what we're trying to hit, is that balance. So, in my mind anyway. So my thought, first off, on the power line easements, I think those should be excluded from developable area. You can't build on it. That seems to me the definition of non-developable. So why are we including that in developable land calculations? I think that should be out. The 25% cap, to me, seems like a reasonable number. That's quite a bit of flexibility. 25% of the number of lots. That's quite a bit of flexibility to make the Tetris game works. And yet, visually, I think it's still going to look like an R8 subdivision, let's say, if 25% of the lots are 20% undersized. As a side note, and I'm not trying to imply that I spent hours and hours and hours on this, but I did do some research on other cities and where they have lot size averaging and where they put a cap on it, and typically they do put a cap on it, the most common number was 25%. So for whatever that's worth. To the small lot issue, I understand the point that she has said, and I already had it in my notes. Seems to me obviously that 3 lots or less, you'd have to waive that 25% cap because you can't even get to 1. And I think whether the number is 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 lots, that's why you guys are up here. But I think it is important that in those smaller ones where it is going to be harder to make the Tetris game work, and there is less impact on the neighbors because there's just not that many houses, that I think there probably does need to be a number where the 25% cap, and below that number, the 25% cap does not apply. That'd be my recommendation.
So say that again.
Whatever the number is, 3, 4, somewhere between 3 and 10, 3 and 8, I don't know. That a subdivision below that number of lots, the 25% cap on the number of undersized lots would not apply. So that, to Commissioner Johnson's recommendation, if somebody could get 4 lots in, but they have to be 10% or 20% undersized, and if they don't use lot size averaging, it costs them an entire lot, which percentage-wise is huge in a smaller development. I just muddied my own explanation, didn't I?
I know. I'm just trying to figure out where the guarantee says that everybody has the right to develop. I'm not, that's just, that's the,
I don't
the
think,
devil's advocate part of coming out.
yeah, I don't think there necessarily is a guarantee, but
No, there is no guarantee.
The code is there to help people be good neighbors when they might not otherwise be. Okay, so small lots, small number of subdivisions, I think that 25% cap is going to be problematic.
Yeah.
I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to suggest number 7. And that is that on lot sizes, in subdivisions of R8 and larger, 20% reductions would be allowed. But in R6 and smaller, only 10% reduction. The thought being, if you take 20% off an 8,000 square foot lot, you still have a 6,400 square foot lot, and it's bigger than the R6 stuff that we're building. But to me, if you take 20% off an R6, and it's 4,800 square feet, that's a tiny lot. I think there's just too much visual impact of losing 20% on an R6. And those numbers actually, they match up, I think, with our definition of medium density versus low density, to where a medium density subdivision of R8 and larger would allow 20% reductions. But no, that's low density. Yes. And a medium density of R6 and smaller would only allow 10%.
Except that R6 is part of low density. R6, 8, and 10 are the same.
Oh, are they?
Well, they're in the same low density category.
Okay,
But they
well, so
aren't
forget that. Forget that part.
They aren't the same.
R8 and larger allow 20%, R6 and larger only 10%.
But then, Mike, wouldn't that be presenting us with the same problem we had a few months back where they wanted R8s, but they were mainly going to be R5s because of the larger lots? That
64.
It would be 6,400 would be the minimum.
They didn't
There
have
was some
anything.
at 5,700, I thought.
There were a couple of them in there.
I thought sure there was, if we looked
Not
at
at-
it.
not at
But doing that 20% to even something, if someone's going for a zone of R8, can really push down what the lot sizes are.
To
If you allow that
64, to
20%.
6,400, and only 25%
That's
of
not
the
an R8 anymore, that's R6.
but only 25% of the lot. I think those two have to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You-
I didn't
you-
hear you say that 25% of the lots.
Yeah. I think 25% of the lot is where the whole thing should start. Because I think, again, it allows for flexibility, but it will still look like the underlying
So if you
zone.
had 10 lots, 25%, 4 of them could be smaller.
No, 25% on 10, two could be.
Two, excuse me, not
Yes.
thinking.
And so you still have 8 of the 10 that are at the original
Yeah,
size.
Or
So
larger,
visually,
because-
or large, yeah. So visually, you don't. Okay.
I like number 8. No.
One more thing, I want to say one more thing.
Sure.
I don't think we should allow lot size averaging. I think we should require lot size averaging, or at least incentivize it. I think that we should require that 25% of the lots be 20% undersized, and 25% of the lots at the same time be 20% oversized. The comment was made over here a couple of times, ticky-tacky, side-by-side R6. If you want to see boring, go drive through or walk through an R6 subdivision that's been built recently. They are boring as can be. The lots are the same sizes, the houses are the same size, the families that want to live there are the same size. And then think about the more interesting areas of our city, where there's a variety of lot sizes, a variety of home sizes.
And in your opinion, where is that?
It's in the older parts of the city. And the reason it's there is because we've gotten so into this lot size density based, part of which required by Metro and the urban growth boundary and the density target we have to hit, we're forced into it. But if we required, and I know this is not something that can get written in tonight, I know I'm tilting at a giant windmill, but I think it needs to be tilted at, because all we're doing is building R6 bedrooms. We're not building any communities with any interest. There's an organization called Strong Towns. I don't know if you've heard of it, and they operate a website called strongtowns.org. And I strongly urge that you go look. It's just filled with great ideas. And a couple of weeks ago, they had some questions to ask about your city. You don't have to go out and take a survey and get percentages. Just ask yourself this. And one of them was, in your town, how easy would it be for 3 generations of the same family to find a place to live within walking distance of each other?
And you're assuming that 3 generations of the same family want to be living together.
Within walking distance. And you can define walking distance however you want. But the point is, we just keep doing this same thing over and over and over again. And this lot size based, I probably blew my time way out of the water. Oh,
Are you familiar with
I can't see.
Levittown in Pennsylvania?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's the first official subdivision.
Right.
We really have not progressed much from that.
So over 100 years, we've been doing it this way.
Yeah.
With really only minor tweaks. So we're trying to build tomorrow's housing with a 100-year-old hammer. And we gotta stop. We gotta get out of this R6, R8 box. This is a start. Someday, I think we need to require variances or the planned unit development. I don't know why that went away.
I don't either. Why did it go?
I don't know, but it seems wonderful to me. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you all.
Good option.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, we have Lynn and West.
Chair McGriff, we didn't get the timer working yet. Would you like us
No,
to
we're
do
good.
that? Okay.
I'll just count.
Cut Lynn off at 10 minutes.
Bob and Paul are keeping track.
Yeah.
I could turn the timer on my phone. Yeah.
Nah, don't bother. Lynn Anderson, Oregon City. I really wasn't going to talk about lot averaging. I actually wanted to talk about something else, but now I'm wondering, should I save that till we get done with lot averaging? I wanted to talk about.
Go ahead and do lot averaging.
Yeah, and then
So-
you can talk about the.
Okay, lot averaging. So I wasn't prepared to talk about it, but when I see this chart up here, I'm really struck by the fact that, it's staff's job to provide you guys with impartial information, and this is so not impartial, this impact. I mean, just look at number 5, it's likely to allow less lots and smaller developments. Well, it also goes to goal 3, it enhances the livability of the community. And it's missing another whole aspect there, which I think you guys noticed that, but I'm a little disturbed by it. I feel like they should be giving you unbiased information, and this looks very biased to me. The other thing is, I don't think this is about density. It's not about development. It's about transparency. And that's been the problem all along, is the fact that, the neighbors were disturbed in that last one. I think, Denise, you mentioned it, and I remember that meeting because Commissioner Mabee had a really good compromise to the development. The people, the citizens weren't opposed to development, they were opposed to the compatibility. You had a great compromise, and the developer said, no, because we don't have to. And it was really, not building good community. So I just think it needs to come back to transparency. People, want to see that. I think the original intent, again, Commissioner Mabee on the commission, was to be flexible for our developers, but unfortunately they took advantage of that, and they've really messed with it and taken away, the clarity to the original intent. If you look at what the original intent was, it was good, and they've just absolutely abused it, and that's why we're where we are today. What else do I want to tell you?
What was your other issue? What was your other issue?
You want me to talk about the other thing on here? The other question I had, apart from the lot adjustment, was the last one on it. This is allow a reduction of minimum parking by 10% in adjacent to a transit route. And I'm coming in late in this. Maybe you guys have already talked about that.
Not specifically. Nope.
No? Okay. Well, I don't understand is reducing the minimum parking by 10% if it's near a transit route. I think the thought behind that is that, oh, good, people live by transit route, and so they're not going to drive their cars to work. They're going to take transit. But they're still going to have a car, and they're still going to need to park it somewhere. So I don't understand why we would want to be limiting the parking. And then right away when I saw this, I thought about the fact that we want to talk about making more residential development in downtown. And downtown already has a horrible parking situation. The number one complaint people have that they don't go downtown is because there's nowhere to park. And so I'm thinking if we're gonna put more development, residential development, and that's right by a transit center, then why would we reduce parking even more? It's just gonna make parking worse.
Where is that specifically, Lynn?
That's 17.522020C4. That was the last one on this page. So I just didn't know if you guys had already looked at that and I'm just missing something, but I'm thinking those people are still gonna have cars. In fact, if they're taking transit, it's gonna make parking worse because they might leave their car there all day and take the bus. So it's even less parking.
So how do we define it adjacent? Are we talking about if the development's next to a transit route? I mean, on a transit route?
Yeah.
Or are you saying 4 blocks from a transit route, a half a mile from a transit route? Maybe that would be clear to the public.
Can you tell me that page number you're on again?
It's on the first page.
Well, it's on the front, so I don't know where it is in the text.
Adjacent is, in this context, is touching.
So it has to be on the route. So they could build something on Malala Avenue, which is a transit route, and have a reduction, but they couldn't build something on Lincoln Street and consider that, because it's not a transit street.
So the actual, it's page 15. When the subject property is adjacent to existing or planned fixed public transit route, so on the street that the bus actually drives on, or within 1,000 feet of an existing or planned transit stop. So it's both.
That's on page 15.
Yes.
Yeah, 1,000 feet, so several blocks deep into a neighborhood.
It typically, I think we look at transit sheds, if you will, which are quarter mile, which is 1,340 feet. So we're kind of
Yeah, 1,000 feet.
going by that. People walk a quarter mile to transit, and so this is about a quarter mile.
It's been done.
And this was
In Raymond, Oregon City, I don't think so.
this was in our code before 2013, and when we adopted the amendments related to the transportation system plan, we adopted other parking reduction abilities, and we accidentally removed this one, inadvertently removed this when we inserted those other reductions. And so some of the folks that were enjoying the benefit of, a reduction when they're on a transit route, after 2013, they lost it. So we were just kind of adding that back in to our code for those developments that are close to transit, but don't otherwise qualify for any reductions.
The question I have is, reading C, the overarching paragraph, it seems to imply that would be in addition to the 50% reduction already in place for downtown overlay district. So that you'd end up with a 60% reduction in an already crowded apartment mixed-use development.
Yeah, and so I want to remind the commission that is one of the most often topics of being traffic in Oregon City, that it's code like this that has been shown to reduce traffic because it will encourage alternative modes.
Yeah, that's one option. If you can't park your car, you won't buy a car.
Well, taking the bus, having a bus pass is a valid option to get around, and people.
Or you may end up with one car in the family instead of two.
I have three. Use car
So
share.
less parking.
I know that's been the thought, but I mean, if you look at
I
like the
don't know.
housing over by the high school, for example, and I think the thought behind that was that, people park in their driveway and that'll take care of it, but people have more than one car, and if you see the parking down there in the house by the high school, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So don't think, I know the utopian thought, yay, we're all gonna ride the bus, but we might ride the bus, but we're still gonna have our cars, and they gotta park them somewhere.
When I went on a site visit,
That was
I
it.
could barely get my small car through there because of the parking on both sides of the street. It
I
was
know, so
not,
I just saw that, and I
it's
just
unsafe.
was a little concerned by that. So I think I'm done. My Lot Avenue thing was just transparency and, instead of all this mumble jumble with all the numbers and everything, and people just, you know what you're getting, you don't have a right to it, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Should be pretty straightforward.
I choked
You can pull that thing.
my
You can
spit
pull
there,
that down.
just getting so nervous here. Say hello to Chairman McGriff, and I am West Richter, and I live in Oregon City, and I've been coming to meetings since October or September when first started looking at lot sizes. And I want to tell you that I really appreciate that you are taking a serious look now after you saw how disappointed my neighborhood was in what is going to go in next to us. I feel that this is a really important issue. And currently, the codes that we have for the zoning allow a lot of flexibility. But a reminder is that flexibility created an R8 development that really turned into an R6 development. So because of all the adjustments that a developer can make in planning their lots, I think that the averaging was the key component in making those lots as small as they are. That if you went with the codes of limiting the percentage of the lots that can be smaller than a zone and limiting how many can be smaller than a zone, that it's workable. But you add in the averaging, and then you ended up with all these really small lots. So if you would just take away averaging off the table, then that would take away the issues of them trying to put in property that really isn't buildable and making big lots to average out for them to be able to fit in their formula for the zoning code. And I definitely feel that I want number one because it has the least flexibility. If you make a law or a rule and you add a whole bunch of different components to it and changes and flexibility, then why did you ever set that rule? If you're going to have zone 8 lots, R8 lots, then there are 8 lots. If you want a development that's R6, then you have a zone R6 development. And I'm not saying don't have small lots, just up front say this is what it's going to be, instead of you hand them somebody that this is going to be R8, but with all the flexibilities that we have, we're really not going to be doing R8. I mean, label it as it really is. You know, don't do this kind of behind the door kind of approach to things. And then I do like the number 5, that the 10% of the perimeter is to only be less than 10% of the bordering property, because that would have made my neighbors really happy. And I think that in thinking back with what was said from the developer, from the property going in next to us, that at one time they had said that changing from R10 lots to R8 lots was only going to be a difference of 3 or 4 lots out of 72 lots. Well, to me, not being the developer, to me that's not a big difference for them, not a big change. So I think that they can accommodate considering the neighboring properties when they plan their lots. And that's it.
I just have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Well, 2. First, how about if we just say R8-ish?
Well,
I'm
see,
just
I was trying to think of some kind of comparison. You tell your child that they have to have this page of homework done by 7 o'clock if they plan on doing some other thing. But then you add in, oh, well, these
And don't forget to
exclusions.
take out the
So you took away really what that rule was. And don't we need to have rules in life? I know
Yeah,
we're getting away from having rules in life, but
Yeah.
I'm old school.
The other thing is I wanted to clarify what you were saying earlier, where you thought we should get rid of lot averaging, but you were okay with them having smaller sized lots.
If they fit with the zone that they're supposed to be.
Okay, so,
So
I
you could-
guess,
You could do the 10% limit. See, I like the 10% instead of the 20%. And so you do have a smaller lot than what the code would say for R8. You
right,
could
but if
do-
you don't have the averaging, then they don't need to make any bigger lots. They can just make them all 10% smaller.
True.
So that's why we have averaging, is that forces bigger lots, not necessarily 40,000
It
square
doesn't
foot.
force them.
Well, it does, because they have to meet their average.
Oh.
But they can make it all with one big lot,
It
which is
doesn't
not.
force them. That's how, did they just use that?
Well. They have to have bigger lots to compensate for the smaller lots with averaging. But I understand what you're saying. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
That's where you're at. Okay, thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Commissioner Espy has said in the past, and maybe some of you guys could put on your agenda for a future time, but it feels like we just kind of like willy-nilly as we're making these decisions. We look at each development as it comes in one at a time. And Commissioner Espy has proposed before about, I don't know what you called it, some sort of a plan where you looked at
Long-range planning?
Yeah, a long-range plan where instead of, so you had some idea of what the zonage should be in each area, instead of each one comes individually and with all of its, problems.
You mean
and
look at the cumulative effect?
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my
yeah.
God, what a concept.
I know.
Yeah, we should,
I
we should
can't take
assign
credit.
zoning to the urban services boundary so that when properties get annexed in, we have a degree of certainty again
Yes.
about what they're gonna be zoned.
Yes, it'd be a plan, like, from the planning commission.
Right.
Well, and what I always tell Laura, she's like, yeah, it's a great idea, but it'll never happen, is I think we shouldn't have future urban 10, we should have future urban 12. Because you can divide a 12,000 square foot lot into 2 6s, or 2 of them into 3 8s, or, the math works out without having to change anything. But an R10 doesn't get divided into anything other than a whole new zone. So,
I do have one more comment. The number 6, it really doesn't make much change.
No.
Yeah.
It's,
Right. Thank you.
and
One thing too is if we do have the equitable housing project going on as well, so this package of code amendments, if you think this is more appropriate for a fuller discussion in the housing realm, you can certainly kick this code amendment to that process, since that's where we have
Do you
these.
have any more people to talk?
Yes, we do. We have Brenda and we have Doug.
Doug who?
Doug Neely.
The Doug.
Our friend Brenda and our friend Doug. And thank you for being creative and using a piece of paper there.
No problem.
They're out.
So I also have been, Brenda Martin, Mount Hood, or I was going to tell my title at work. I live on Hazeldale Avenue, and I've been talking about this issue since July. I think it's been July when it was posted in my yard, what was going to be built behind me. And to be honest, what I'm hoping to get out of this is if I'm looking at a form or a publication, that the general public will understand it. So when we initially, the neighborhood, my neighborhood that's adjacent to that, when they're looking at it, it said going from R10 to R8, and we're like, we can live with that. We knew that someday they were going to build, but when they decided to put the actual subdivision plot map, it was totally something different. So if you guys remember, we came in here with 60 people, and we had 90 signatures saying, please, can we not? So we had asked, what can we do? And they said, they're within their rights because there's lot averaging. So, Laura, you had asked what the problem was. The problem was we want to be able to look at a form and it says R10 and that they're applying for R8, that they're really going to get R8. And in this subdivision, of course, we didn't win. I'm just helping future residents that if they're applying for whatever they're applying for and when we see a posting, that we understand the posting and that there's not allowing for all these things. When we went to the city commissioners after you guys voted yes and went to the city commissioners.
We voted no.
We voted no.
You voted no and it went to them and they said,
that we aired.
But when we went there, they were saying that traffic wasn't an issue. When I've been sitting here for the last 10 meetings, traffic is an issue because we didn't have a traffic study. We couldn't fight it. That was one reason why we couldn't win that part. And that the schools didn't come. And we also know there's going to be a measure coming out or a bond for the schools. So everything that we were trying to say, and it's not that we don't want the development, it's just that we want it to be fair.
What, transparency?
Yes, that's what we want.
We tried. We tried to make a suggestion that
Well.
able to do those 3 lots.
Better leave it there before I get carried away.
Yeah, okay.
One more thing. This isn't my first home. This is not a starter home. So when they're talking about people having affordable housing, and I didn't start with a 10,000 square foot house. I started an apartment. I worked my way up to that. And when we're asking for cohesiveness, it would have been nice if the houses gradually went smaller and not just small right on top of me. I have 3 houses directly behind me.
Yeah. So you kind of like the 5 option where the perimeter houses basically have to meet zoning.
Or even if it was 10% less, that'd be fine. But you're putting 3 6s behind my 12.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Doug?
Okay. I'm confused by the timer because all it does is blink red and green all the time, and none of those other lights are telling me anything.
Red means stop, green means go.
Okay, well, you can say, well, then
Don't worry about the
I
time.
can't speak very well because it's going green and red at that speed on this side right here, and there's nothing lit up on the top.
Yeah, I'm looking at the top. I can't tell.
Yeah, we don't see anything.
We can only see the top.
Just take it away, Kelly. Yeah.
Go ahead, Doug.
It's your magnetic personality.
I wasn't planning to speak on this item at all. I was coming on the next one, and then I felt I had to say a few things. Major thing I'm going to come up to, I think I'll leave to last. The notion of livability, that's in the definition of the person that's buying the property and living there. When I was in the 3rd grade, my parents moved from a lower middle class neighborhood to an upper middle class neighborhood, and that upper middle class neighborhood was Laurelhurst District. And you'll see corner lots that are huge that have mansions on them. I don't think our house exceeded 6,000 square feet. I think it was closer to 5,000 square feet. And most of the houses were that way. And people go through the Laurel Horse District and say, boy, that's a great place to live in. And it was. It doesn't have to do with density per se, a livable community. And I have a degree in terms of flexibility. I wanted to come to Commissioner Mahoney's statement about small parcels in terms of the limitations you should make on them and concerns about traffic. If you don't incorporate good policies in terms of infill, which may include higher density, you're going to force yourself to go basically into bringing land from the urban reserves into the urban growth boundary earlier. And it's not going to make one difference in terms of traffic because we're all going to go through the same choke points no matter what because of our geography of the area. And so lower density is not what's going to create the traffic problems. It's our geology that creates the traffic problems here. The thing I wanted to speak to, I don't know how many options that Mike put forward here, but I'm going to add one that I'm sure Mike will love.
Number 8.
Write it down.
Well, I think he had 7, 8, 9 in his presentation anyway. But he was talking and others here were talking about why did we ever give up the planned unit developments? When we had planned unit developments, we could accept lower densities, but we got something in the process.
Exactly.
What we don't get anymore is parks. We are becoming park deficient very rapidly as growth occurs. And we have I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if we have a mechanism of forcing parks in terms of developments, and I'll let the two people that know the most there talk about that. But the point is, that option should be on the table that yes, you can have lower densities in a given zoning as long as the city gets something in return that benefits the general public.
Yeah, we're not getting anything in return with lot averaging.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I thought the Plan Unit Development Code was a good option, allowed for some flexibility. You could take land that was a little bit iffy, and you could do something very creative with it. We're not getting that.
Not even the park place.
No, we're not getting any perks. We're not getting any amenities. We're not getting. I agree with you, Doug, 100%.
Okay.
All right, last chance. Anybody else want to get anything in? Okay. We're going to close it, and gentlemen, what is your pleasure?
I have one point of order question.
Go right ahead.
First public meeting, but this is a legislative one.
Right.
But we did get a request for a continuance. Are we bound by that, like we would be if it was land use?
We have to vote on that, don't we?
No.
We've also.
No, you're not, I mean, I'm not sure that this is the initial evidentiary hearing because I think there was a hearing
Right, there was
before
one
this.
before, yes.
But in any event, no, you're not, this is not a quasi-judicial hearing, so you're not subject to the, I request a continuance, I automatically get one.
Okay, I just wanted
But it
to.
is certainly your choice if you want to continue this.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a
There's no
trigger that it happened.
decision-making time limit, there's
Yeah, I just
much
wanted to
more
make-
open.
I just want to make clear there wasn't a trigger that it happened.
No.
Okay, all right. Well, I have a question for Kelly that isn't about lot averaging, since we
Okay,
were going to get
yes,
through
we're
all
going to
this.
get back to the other stuff.
And it has to do with 1762-065D, page 25, for those that are wanting to look at something.
Get into this.
I've read this so many times, my eyes are frozen.
I fell asleep after page 1.
So, all the way at the bottom of page 25, you're striking out the outdoor lighting thing. I can see that large portions of it have been re-assimilated in other locations and/or it was said in some other way. The one thing I don't see is any protection for the night sky. This particular language had night sky, glare in it, and I don't see that protection has been replaced with any of the other others.
Sure.
And that is my concern. I mean, as the city bloom gets bigger and bigger, you know, we want to try to limit that. I mean, the idea that somebody's got their porch light pointed up into the sky is kind of ludicrous, but it does happen. Or somebody's cover that they have on their porch light comes off and they just, I'm not going to bother to, you know, deal with it. And so, is there some other place where the night sky is protected?
We do have at the top of page 26, under the new version of sub 1, any light source or lamp that emits more than 900 lumens, 13 watt, compact fluorescent or 60 watt incandescent shall be concealed or shielded with a full cutoff style fixture in order to minimize potential for glare and necessary diffusion on adjacent property.
Yes, but that refers to glare and diffusion on adjacent properties,
Yeah,
not the night sky.
I think we need something in there that deals with that.
We also have, sorry, there's a lot of these. Page 27, next page, number new sub 9. For upward directed architectural, landscape, and decorative lighting, light emission shall not be visible above the building roof line.
Well, I think there's specific references when he's talking about night sky, it's got to specifically talk about that. It's something that everybody seems to know about.
Above that, sub 8 also talks about narrowing the cone for light fixtures used to illuminate flags, statues, and other objects mounted on a pole, pedestal, or platform shall use a narrow cone beam of light that will not extend beyond the illuminated object.
The night sky is mentioned still in the purpose section on page 25 at the top, number 5. And so it's stated in the purpose statement for this section of the zoning code. And then I think that when we review, as Laura stated, when we review lighting plans, we look for those full cutoff fixtures.
Yeah.
So that everything's shining down.
Okay, yeah, I'm with the 9, which talks about not visible above the roof line and illuminating flags, and the statement that we're concerned about the night sky. I'm okay with the omission. I just was concerned that there was like, you know, and then we suddenly end up with all these blooms with the car dealers doing their spotlights and everything. And so, okay, that's it. Through pages and pages.
I had a question about 23, page 23 on number 20. I have a particular, I just want to make sure that this reads the way I think it does, is that I have had a concern over the years about mechanical equipment not being reviewed as part of site plan and design review, and we've ended up with some really awful situations in my neighborhood that should not have occurred. So I think there was something, I thought I saw in here that this is now part of the review, and that they have to have a parapet, has to be screened, other things that they have to do to make sure that any roof-mounted or wall-mounted or ground-mounted mechanical equipment needs to be dealt with. Am I reading that correctly?
When we adopted the type 1 site plan review process, we added mechanical equipment changes to that. So we actually do review all mechanical equipment installations in the site plan design review process. So this letter D was kind of obsolete.
Okay. And then I noticed on you've got D, former E is now D, so you're saying it does not apply to solar energy panels? Have you, I mean, you may come across a situation, I mean, what if somebody wants to put a windmill in their backyard and not that they would, but there may be some issues with siting those?
Right.
Depending on where they are on a building, or?
Except that this is dealing with mechanical equipment, yeah, okay.
Well, a solar panel could be considered as a mechanical.
Well, not solar, but the windmill is what my concern would be. Because what good is a solar panel if you've screened it from the sun?
Well, you know, it's been known to happen.
Yeah. But yeah, the idea of, yeah, so.
Okay, so you answered my question about the adjacent. I apologize for beating this with a dead horse, but I still think that you need to add an additional definition, because a live-work unit is not the same as a work-live unit. And if I hadn't done all the work on this about 5 years ago, I wouldn't be, I had to do this for Commissioner Katz, Mayor Vera Katz. They are built to different standards. One is one thing and one is something else. So you're saying that, you know, the primary purpose of a live-work unit is that you live there. Your working is incidental. If you have a work-live unit, your primary focus is that you work there and your living is incidental. And they are different things. It has to do, again, as I explained before, it has to do with how they are constructed.
Which amendment are you referring to?
I'm referring to under, you have permitted uses in MUC 1 and MUC 2, so I'm assuming you're talking about a business that would have an occupancy on the ground floor as a work unit.
Oh,
That's on page
letter
6.
They probably have different occupancy ratings too.
Yes, they do.
So we're adding to that list of permitted uses, we're proposing to add residential units, single and two family, if they're in the same building as another permitted use in the zone. Is that what you're asking about?
No, I'm asking you about the live-work unit under page 6.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to see what the definition was, and what you have a definition of a live-work unit, which is, in my mind, and my research shows me it's primarily a residential unit. The working is incidental to the living. If you want to allow people to work and live upstairs, it's the reverse in a commercial zone. It says MUC 1 and MUC 2, which I'm assuming those are commercial zones.
Yes.
Mixed use. So you want somebody to be working there primarily, and they sort of incidentally live upstairs.
So you'd like us to
I'm asking you, is that what you mean? In those commercial zones, you're saying you're allowed to live upstairs, but your primary occupancy is going to be that you work there.
So we implement them through the standards in 1754-105, so that's what we're going for. I don't know that there is a primary live
primary
or work.
occupancy of what you're talking about in the commercial zone. Are you saying that the primary thing that they're doing there is working there? Are they working there or they're living there?
I'd have to grab that book from you and see if there's a purpose section in
I was trying to find it.
Okay.
She had two things tabbed, and that was very helpful, but it still didn't answer my question.
Okay.
Also, these are mixed-use zones, and so they allow multifamily.
Right.
And so we see a lot of proposals for multifamily developments with live-work units on the ground floor. And so in that case, I don't think that our intent is to say that it has to be a work-live.
Well, again, let me say this another way. If these are a mixed-use zone, the way that it is constructed has a lot to do with what it is you want to have happen there. If you're building it to a residential standard, then the work is incidental and the living is the primary use. If you are building it to a commercial standard in the mixed-use zone, then the primary occupancy is the work and the living is incidental. They are two. That's why most people don't do it, because the building code requires it to be a certain way. You've got, if you're working there, then you've got to meet ADA, you've got to meet all that other stuff that's built to a commercial standard. If you're living upstairs, like back in the old days, then it's different. If it's primarily a residential occupancy, then this is your definition.
Right, and I think it's meant to be similar to a multifamily unit, except that it's built to accommodate retail space or office space.
Right, which means they would have to build the bottom floor to a commercial standard in order for that to occur, particularly if you have people coming into it and all that. I just wanted to be clear, because I went through 2 code compliance issues with the city of Portland based on that. That is why I know it by heart. And I couldn't do anything to make it work for the person who wanted to work there and live there, because it was built to a residential standard. They couldn't widen the doors, they had no ability to have ADA access, which is required by law.
Right. All right, I think I have an answer for you. So in the purpose statement, they just talk about allowing flexibility to live in commercial zones, but there is a subsection 1754-105 sub B, which says A live-work dwelling is allowed instead of or in addition to a home occupation as defined in OCMC Chapter 1704. The business portion of the dwelling shall be limited to the ground floor and may not exceed 50% of the square footage of the entire dwelling, excluding the garage or 1,000 square feet, whichever is smaller number. So it's more of a live-work than work-live.
Yeah, that means that they're going to be severely constrained on who they can have come there because they won't be able to meet the commercial requirements. I just wanted to be clear because
Yeah.
people, believe me,
Good question.
the city of Portland talk about rigorous stuff. The other thing that I had noticed, not only in this and some other document, this has nothing to do with you personally, so be clear that I'm saying this. There seems to be an awful lot of discretion in here to whoever sits in the chair of the community development director. And I am wondering if so many things should be that way.
Versus the planning commission?
I'm not saying it's us. I mean, if we're trying to do, clear, I like some flexibility, obviously, because you can interpret things different ways. But if, everything goes that way, then I'm just concerned about the transparency issue.
I appreciate rules and transparency too. If you ever want to, I think
Yeah.
that that's a thing that's helpful, right?
Yeah.
It's helpful when you say, it's discretionary, here's the criteria we use.
I also noticed on page 21 and 20, you talk about, I have to go back to, there's so many under the subsection, I have to go back to the subsection. So standards, all development shall comply with, and then it lists all these things, and you get down to 2, and 2A through M, then 3, A and B, then 4, and then you get to A, and it says, the Community Development Director may utilize the Historic Review Board's guidelines for new construction to develop findings to show compliance with this section. So we're talking about additions, alterations, and new construction within the McLaughlin Conservation District, Kenema National Register District, and the Downtown Design District when abutting a historic landmark shall utilize materials and design that incorporates the architecture of the subject building as well as surrounding district or abutting historic landmark. And then it goes da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Shall be retained or replaced with kind materials unless the Community Development Director determines that the materials cannot be retained and the new design and materials are compatible with the subject building or district or landmark. Then it says the Community Development Director may utilize. In this case, I'll have to say I'm going to go with the more restricted and say that the Community Development Director shall utilize them. Because how are you going to make findings otherwise if you don't use those, particularly if it's abutting a landmark?
The one thing I would say about these code changes is the purpose of this was to do sort of a quick code change section. Look at if there's anything that's glaring, repeating, unclear. We are doing the Equitable Housing Project, which is looking at the whole package and the formatting of that package and narrowing down on discretion like you're talking about as well and things like this. So if you're uncomfortable adding language tonight that we haven't really thought about before, there is still that process where we're looking through that.
I don't want to rest these code changes on what may happen with the equitable housing because I think that is a whole nother ball of wax that this commission is going to be dealing with.
We've lost Bob.
Yeah, he said he had to leave at 9:30 and it's not quite 9:30, so he's starting to leave early.
Yep.
So other than that, I don't have anything else. Did you have anything?
I just want to get to this.
Well, Paul? We've been reading this, Laura, so, that's one good thing.
I guess the only thing I've got other than this, the 1 through 7, is the parking question that was brought up, page 15. I'm okay with the reduction of 10% as long as it doesn't stack with the 50% that's already happening with the downtown. Because the downtown's already on a transit zone, so you're just flat out saying it's 60%.
Yeah, it doesn't. I double checked that. So if you look back on page 14, letter C, 50% reduction in the minimum number of parking spaces is allowed prior to seeking further reductions in subsections 2 and 3 below.
But
So
what about
2 and
4?
3, but not 4.
Okay.
2 and 3, but not 4. Well, I'd say at this point,
okay.
let us make a decision about everything else except lot averaging, and we can take that separately.
Well, I think that's all that's left.
I know, but how does everybody else feel about the rest of it?
Well, I'm good.
Rest is fine.
Okay. All right, so where are we going with the lot averaging? Do we have any that we'd like to flat out eliminate under number 1 through 8? We don't have 7 and 8 written down, but we know kind of sort of
I
what
have
they
a
are.
question.
No more questions?
Question
No,
regarding.
I'm kidding.
I like 1 plus 4 plus, no. If you look at number 1, or any of these other ones, limit size reduction to 10% and limit to 25% of total lots. So what happens in a previous case where you had 3 lots that were 25,000 or more, had 75,000 there? So is that, can they use those 3 lots as 25% of the total lots, or are we using acreage? So
Well,
so in that same number 2, then limit reduction to 25% of total lots and reduction of up to 20 doesn't really work, because if you can use 3 lots that are that big, 1 is better than 2, because you can still use those 3 huge lots in that 25% of total lots.
Right, but it still doesn't change the number of lots that can be reduced. So.
Well, 20% doesn't, but the first one does.
Well, but that's just it, is, so you have 10 lots to use. Well, we'll use 100, that makes math easier.
Okay.
Limit reduction to 10% and limited to no more than 25% of the lots. So 25 of them can be 10% smaller. It doesn't matter how big the other lots are. The average has to be higher than that. And they could do it with 1 big lot, but the other 74 lots have to meet the whatever the R is. So no matter what, whether you do 5 bigger lots, 1 huge lot, no more than 25 of those lots can be smaller.
Okay.
So.
So the only difference between 1 and 2 is 10% versus 20%.
Yes.
Well, I like 1 with a combination of 4 for me, because I don't think power lines should be included in the first place. And I also like the number 5 included, but mainly 1 plus 4, with maybe 5 thrown in.
1, 4 with a dash of 5.
That's right.
Number 1 and number
4, because removing the power lines altogether.
I guess real quick, do we want to just do, is everybody okay with 4? Just in general?
Yep.
Yes.
Take power lines out?
Yes.
Okay.
Support that.
All right, well, let's add power lines to non-developable thing.
Okay, and we can always, if you wanted us to do anything with these combinations,
Yeah.
right? We can
That's
come
why I
back
said
next
I
time.
like a combination, and
I
even
mean-
5,
Yeah.
the 10% below the other line.
It's hard to know, like, when we put them together right now, what that means.
Yeah.
Or what
But
that
I
looks
think
like.
4 is good, because like,
It seems
most
easy.
of it just isn't, I mean, a
Shouldn't
lot of
be
times
limited.
they've got chain link fences blocking them off anyway, so it's not like you can add it to your yard, so.
So I go back, then I like 1 plus 5. After what I've been through up here with several of these, I like 1 plus 5.
I like number 2.
You like number 2?
Yeah, I agree with number 2. I like it too.
So you like number 2 and number 4?
Right.
Yeah, I think we're all on 4.
Yeah, I'm just making a note.
No one's saying 5 yet. Do I hear 6? No.
Paul?
I'm looking at 1, 3, and 4. I'm in an environment where we do no reduction to lot size, regardless of parcel or anything.
Yeah, just come in at the zone you want and build bigger if you need to.
Yep.
So I'll just flag that Bob is left, and Laura earlier mentioned that it might make sense to postpone this until the equitable housing as well for discussion.
I would agree with that, with the fact that I think we heard some good suggestions from the citizen audience tonight.
That's no
And
citizen.
we may have Mike signed up for option 7, and I don't know if Doug knows which option he signed up for, 8 or 10 or 11. Did somebody capture those?
Land developments was 8.
Those
And Mike was,
those good ideas that came, and we kind of reshuffle it or add it to these here. If we want to exclude 4, then we add the new ones
I think
to
should condense it rather than
5
expand it.
remaining or
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, I think we need to.
I'd like us to move ahead because
Start
I
preparing,
think we've got an expectation from our community that we don't know how long the equitable housing is going to take, and I don't really see that equitable housing is going to be doing subdivisions. I think they're looking at more of doing multiple family type dwellings or
ADUs
others,
and
ADUs and things of that sort.
They are looking at subdivision
And we
standards
have,
as well.
we have members of our community who are expecting this to get passed, so there isn't like the land rush of everybody getting their development stuff in before we make the change to the code, and I'd like to see this happen sooner than later.
Before, yeah.
Laura, do we know when the equitable housing report will be finished?
We've already had, I believe, 3 meetings. We have one more advisory group meeting, and then you'll see us put together a package, and then it'll come before Planning Commission, City Commission. I think we hope to be before the commissions in late summer,
Yeah, it's large.
early fall.
It's very large and it's very complicated, and we have I'm sitting on that representing us and myself and God knows whoever else, and it's way more complicated than you think it's going to be.
3.
No, but really just pointing out, we do know when it'll be done.
Yeah.
It's a grant-funded
There's
process.
something
Yeah.
here that
It may
I
be-
haven't absorbed yet
It
tonight.
may be a date certain, but the community needs more time, and the
So is that
community is
different
going to
than
need
this?
time to understand this, and we're gonna need time to understand it. Because I can tell you, I've gone to 3 meetings, and
Okay, so,
I had a hard time explaining it to my neighborhood association what it was about.
okay. So I go with, after understanding this, I go with what Paul was saying, 1, 3, and 4, was it? Yeah, 1, 3, and 4 then. 5 was similar to 3, I was just confused about the difference.
Well, what do you see the difference between 1 and 3 is?
No, 1 with 3, the 2 of them together.
The 2 of them together?
They're the
3
same
allows
thing.
more flexibility because you get to do it with all the lots. 1, you only get to do it with 25% of the lots.
Yeah.
Okay.
How
So-
far do we want to be?
Originally, I was going with 5, and I said cross 5 out.
Okay, well, I'm going with number 1 and number 4. I think number 3 is way too broad, and although the comment is less likely to result in conflicts, but lots would be more, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out in my mind how number 3 comes out to meet the needs of what our community said.
Well, then what's
Will it
the-
result in more compatibility?
Then what's the difference between that and 5? We were just talking about that.
Well, it
Because
depends
originally I said 5.
depends on how big the subdivision is. On that 70 or 90 subdivision, there was about 40 lots that were interior.
Right.
And so they would be able to be the 20%. The exterior lots, and the downside I see with the perimeter is, if the perimeter, part of the perimeter is completely undeveloped, I don't think that should count. It should be adjacent housing perimeters.
Yeah, no, I
But,
would agree.
But then those houses couldn't be more than 10% off of the zoning of the subdivision. So you could still have a 10,000 square foot house, and on the other side of the fence, an R8 with a 10% bump, so it's a 7,200 square foot.
Okay,
That's
I
number
get-
3 or 5?
That's 5.
yeah.
But it does prohibit them from doing the 20%
So
bump.
explain that same one with 3.
3 just says every single one of those 90 lots could be 9,000 square feet, period.
Every single one of them.
Every single one of them.
How does that, is that different than number 1?
Yes, number 1 says of those 90 lots, only
5%.
Yeah, 25% can be 9,000 square feet.
Okay.
Just to clarify, number 3 says that they could average to 10% below.
Right.
So they can't all be below, because then they wouldn't.
Yeah, but they can do And of the 100 lots, they could have 99 9,000 square foot lots and one 150,000 square foot lot.
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, then I'm probably just number one.
Yeah, so, and actually where I'm at is, I have a question about what you said, what you have for 6. What is the shrinkage threshold? Is it 20% with number 6?
It's the existing code as it stands.
Plus this upper limitation?
It's a limit.
Okay. I'm actually, I'm leaning towards 6, but I think it should be 2 times, not 3 times.
I said I didn't like 3 times.
Because that lets you have 20,000 square foot lot and some 8,000 square foot lots. And that combination limits, by itself, limits how many small lots you can have. Because they're immediately balanced by big lots. And I think 30,000 lets you have way too many little lots. But I think, so, just by just adding, 2 times, especially because we're already limiting the power line, put a cap on how big a lot can be, then I think that's going to create, the sizing. And that lets the smaller people develop to what they need to develop, because they're not going to build a 40,000 and 2 10s. They're going to build, 5 8s and, or 5 9, whatever it is. So I think the problem has really been the cap. I mean, to me, when I saw that one particular one, it was, look, there's 6,400 square foot lots and 54,000 square foot lots. OMG. And that was what just shook me up with that. That's what said they're abusing the system. But if there's a cap, whether it's 2, 2.5, 3, whatever, I think that solves it. And I think 2 is the number, because that lets you have a 20,000 square foot and 5, 10, 8,000 square footers. So you have. Right, yeah, that's what the current code is 20%.
I wish it was included, like, after the sentence that also size reduction of 20%. Well,
yeah, the implication, I mean, when they write it up, it'd be clear, but.
Sure.
So that, just for the record, that's where I'm at, is of course 4 and 6 with 2 times.
So.
Well, and number 4.
Yeah, that's what I said, 4 and 6.
This is where Carrie and I start to get a little nervous.
Sure.
Because we're thinking, all right,
That's what you get.
BPA easements sometimes are really big, like feed. If you don't include them in net developable, they are getting included in lot size, but if you can't get double the lot size, can you get it to fit within that power line easement? And so if we were going in this direction, I would like a continuance on this piece so we could think about it more than 5 minutes.
I agree that this section we need to have a continuance, because we're throwing a couple of different items out. But that's where I'm at with, I think 6 with 2 times.
Well, maybe that's where we leave it then, is we consider that we are all, I think, have consensus on number 4, but using that, like rethinking what number 6 like would be, assuming that we're removing power line easements from the net developable area. What would that mean?
So you're saying just 4 and 6?
I will vote
That's
no
what
on
you're
6.
saying?
Yes.
I said include 1, and so did Paul.
Yeah.
No way on 6.
Well, again, I don't think it's our job to figure out how a piece of property can be developed. We create the standards, and it's somebody else's job to figure out how many, whatever they can get on it. And if they don't get as many, it meets the code. It's not about the amount, in my mind.
The problem is EPA didn't put their lines straight. It's this stupid diagonal across
They
the
were there
land
first
thing.
before anybody else was around here, so.
And they know about straight lines. They
Yes,
can
they
make
do.
90s. They don't have to go
They were here
angles.
before the settlers got here.
EPA, no, they came after. They bought the land fair and square. Okay, well, looks like we have definite consensus on number 4. We have
2 on number 1.
We have 3 of us who like number 1. And Bob didn't leave me his score, so I don't know where he's at on that. And 1 for number 6 at 2 times.
Did you like 2 at one
I
time?
like number 2, but I'm intrigued by the idea of an amended number 6. So I will move that we continue the discussion to a future meeting.
Well,
I'll second.
again, we have consensus on number 4, so that's for sure.
Yeah, let me look up a meeting date, but we can think about combination of 1 + 4 and then 6 + 4. That sounds like those are the ones we're dialing in on?
No, because
No,
there's
no, 'cause we
3
don't
of us
have
for
a
number
say.
1.
Well, but
That, we're not dialing in. when
No,
3
2
is-
options, I'm saying.
Yeah.
I come back with 2 options, and one of them is 6 + 4 and one is 1 + 4.
And I'd like to see number 2 in play as well.
2 + 4, 1 + 4, 2 + 4, and 6 + 4?
Yeah.
We're right back to the same list.
Hey, we're narrowing the
Okay,
list.
so we're eliminating number 5, right?
yes,
And looks like we're eliminating number 3.
Right.
yes.
So, Zach, is
I'm not
that
real thrilled about number 2.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think number 2 gets us anything.
Kind of likes number 6 now with 20.
Well, we can have an easy outlier.
Sure, I agree.
About it at all.
Oh, and it,
Okay, so we have a motion to continue.
Give me 1 second, and I'll grab the date.
And without Bob here.
Bob could just throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing.
Yeah, I want number 7 and number 8. That's what Bob will say.
Yeah, and I mean, we have otherwise
And then
come
we'll
to
come up with 9.
And I think we should consider some of these.
Let's hope not.
Well, I was going to say, we've otherwise come to consensus on the other proposed changes, so hopefully in
Yeah,
this
it-
next conversation.
I just keep thinking.
We're only, the next conversation we have, unless somebody sees some glaring thing, but they're gonna call me ahead of time and tell me,
Of course they will.
I
we
just
are
keep
only
thinking-
gonna deal with this chart.
Right.
I just keep thinking we've gone over this so many times. How could we not have made up our
So,
minds already?
hold on now, can we approve the stuff that we don't have a problem with though tonight?
yes,
Okay.
I think we did.
We have this is 1 file number.
Oh,
Oh, we can't break that out?
So how much more discussion?
Okay, so
We
do
only
have
noticed 1
to change our mind?
ordinance.
We have to continue the whole thing. Okay, that's fine.
So we can't do this by Friday, which is what we'd have to do to get it into the next meeting, which is March 26th. That we can do it by April 9th. That will be a very busy hearing because we have a large annexation
And
on
you're gonna
April
have
9th.
hundreds of people here, I can tell you.
So there's also April 23rd.
Okay,
So to me,
So-
this is more important than that.
bring it.
Wait, so April 9th
Yes,
or April 23rd?
April 9th.
And do you want this first then, since it
Yes.
sounds quick, or second?
Other than changing the word 3 to 2, we've seen this over and over and over again. What is there to really discuss? I'm not changing.
Okay, so it sounds like April 9th.
All right.
Got it.
yep. So go April 9th, and we'll just have a vote on what's left with
Couldn't we do that vote
Bob.
right now?
Because Bob isn't here.
Excellent.
There's been 2 people missing for the last few meetings where we voted on things. I'm just saying.
I don't have any problem voting on it
Motion
tonight.
I believe you have a motion and
We
a
have-
second.
We got a
yes, we
motion
did.
and a
That's
second.
right.
So
And
you-
we're having discussion.
Yeah, so you can just vote not to have a continuance,
Yeah.
and then we will act on this.
Okay, all right, so let's call the question.
Okay, motion to continue to April 9th.
No.
Commissioner,
Nope, April 23rd.
No, 9th was
We
the
said
big.
the
Did you
9th.
decide on the 9th, the same
Yes.
night?
It'll be-
I hope you don't put that first, because there's gonna be a lot of
That's
people.
exactly what we're
We
doing.
lost the last
Just
time.
vote on the
I'm
continuance.
just upset about how many people we lost the last time.
Don't be upset.
We lost half the
We're
people in the
voting on the
audience.
continuance.
Just vote on the continuance. Let's just
So-
move along.
Just say no, and then we go on.
Mr. Espy,
No.
Commissioner Guile,
No,
Commissioner Maybe,
Can you call me last?
he can be last.
Next to last?
He can be
You're
next to
supposed to
last.
jump
He
to
can
the
be next
end.
to last. All right, jump to the end.
Commissioner Henkin,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Maybe.
God, it's back to you. So
The
if,
clock is ticking.
no, I just want to be sure of the rules, so if it ties, it fails, correct?
Yes,
Correct.
All right, I vote yes for continuance.
I vote no.
So it ties, it fails. So
I'm calling Bob.
Bob's already in bed.
So how long is this discussion gonna take the next time?
No, there is no next
There
time.
is no continuance, we are voting on it now.
Do you want to continue to a different date, or do you not want to
No.
continue?
Well, let's just solve it.
Let's just solve the
And
problem.
we'll fix it if we need to fix it.
And then
If the continuance
we
fails.
do have another agenda item.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, point of order, we have 15 minutes left of this
Right.
hearing.
We can do the other one in less time than that.
Okay.
All right, let's figure out what we want.
Well, let's do a vote for option 1 and 4. And see if that passes.
Okay,
And then,
I'll second it.
so it'd be option 1
Just
and
get it on the
option
table.
4.
I didn't think we were going to have any votes.
Well, the
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for option 1 and 4. Paul?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Zach?
No.
Vern?
No.
Damon?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Do we want to vote on the next one too, or just?
There
that
is
one?
nothing to vote on.
That's it, we're done.
Okay, so you can do a motion for the whole package then.
Okay, so let's have a motion on the entire package.
Move approval of the packages presented with the options for lot averaging being 1 and 4.
Second.
Question.
I have a question. What's the motion?
The motion is to vote on the entire package of amendments, including our decision on lot averaging.
Which is 1 and 4. Which was carried by 4 to 2.
I would have been willing to go with 3 reducing down, number 6 reducing down to 2, but that didn't get in the motion. Okay, so on the motion to do the entire package? Zach? We're voting.
On the whole package.
Vern?
No.
Damon?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Does not preclude us revisiting this issue and it coming out in the affordable housing stuff.
All right.
But
All right, let's
now-
open the
but now
public hearing
rules are in
on
place for anybody who comes in with a
our last
subdivision,
item of the
they know what
night,
the rule is.
mobility standards. We have looked at this one to death,
what I
and
didn't
thank
wanna
you for
have
adding all
somebody
the
else show
additional
up
items on
tomorrow.
goal 5, so we don't get challenged on that. So this is adoption of revised findings for L 1703, legislative amendment to amend Chapter 12-04205 of the Oregon City Municipal Code for alternative mobility standards for Highway 213 at Beaver Creek and the Transportation System Plan project list. So why don't we just get right to it? We know everything. Do you want her to explain the Redland Road thing again?
We don't know everything.
Because we've got 15 minutes.
I felt honored and happy that Kelly called me last Friday and discussed with me the Redland Road situation, and I asked her to explain to us what she told me on a phone conversation last Friday. So if you would be so kind as to tell them what you told me.
Sure. We came, just to summarize last meeting, the commission voted to approve the amendment and come back now, 2 weeks later, to adopt findings, or adopt improved findings for goal 5 and for safety impacts. So we provided those findings, redline staff report. The conversation that Commissioner Guile and I had was about the removal of the Redland Road from the proposal and what really that means. And the reason that Redland Road was taken out is that we got more information that gave us the confidence that the Redland Road expansion, or the Highway 213 expansion at Redland Road, is likely enough to be funded in the future, that we don't need to raise the congestion limits for that intersection. So we're only looking at the alternate mobility standards for Beaver Creek and 213. Is that?
Redland Road is still out of it, out of the plan, you're saying? It's just that you've raised.
Redland Road, the improvement project is still in the plan on the books. It's likely enough to be funded in the future. We have enough certainty about that project will have funding that we don't need to change any congestion limits or mobility standards for that intersection.
So before you were going to raise the limit so that it could have met with more congestion.
Congestion.
That's what I'm about to get. And without more congestion, so now you're saying that it's going to stay there, but at some point, there's no guarantee when or if, but that it's still in there, that maybe when
Right.
all the development takes place in Park Place, something could happen.
Right,
But after the fact, as you and I discussed, Park Place could be fully developed with 1,800, 2,400 homes, and the road still might be there the same way because they wouldn't have enough money to fix it until all those homes were built.
Our models show that with the improvements and with the development, so with the planned improvements that we have for all the roads, including that intersection, and with all the planned development in Park Place, that we can meet the target. The existing mobility targets, so we don't have to raise them or change them in order to be able to meet them. We can meet them as they are today.
Well, with all the developments, that was my question after talking to you, with all the developments of the 1,200 homes at Park Place, all the ones that are going to the airstrip, Sears Farm, all the new little ones, we just heard another one last week at Park Place area, a neighborhood association. There's so many, how can they project what it's gonna be when they don't even know, when we don't even know how many homes are necessarily coming in at any given time?
Yeah, we're using a model that is uses the planned land uses in the area based on the Park Place concept plan, so we know how many.
But that's just the Park Place concept plan, I'm
Right.
talking about all the other areas.
And we have, the regional model includes the data for the entire region, so we know what the future density and land use will be in Park Place. We also know what it will be region-wide, and including in the outlying county areas, and so that's all included in the model. It's the best we have.
I appreciate your information. I'm not happy with it, but I appreciate your information. And thank you for honoring me by calling me to explain it to me. That was really appreciated.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
No, are we taking,
We have one public comment.
but we closed the record already?
Did we close the record on this already?
Mm-hmm.
I
I
think
don't
that you
think we
did.
did. I don't think we did.
It's on public,
This is legislative.
Yes.
I
Doug said
mean,
it.
if you closed it, you can open it.
Okay,
I
I
don't
just
believe
want to
we
make sure
did.
we do the right steps.
Yeah,
Not
I
that
don't
I don't
believe
want to
we
hear from the audience, but
Oh, that's what you're telling Doug.
no, I'm just making sure that if we closed it and then he talks
I don't-
and somebody says, hey, you let somebody testify after you close the record.
I don't believe
So
that
I
we
think we
did.
should make sure by saying you are now opening the record and then we'll hear testimony.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, so we are opening
Open it for 5
the
minutes.
public hearing for Doug Neely to make a comment,
well,
or whoever else is out there.
You get 25 minutes. Just kidding.
Doug Neely, Oregon City, but also Chair of the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council. I believe there was a reference at the last meeting about input from the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council. I don't know there were any attachments at that time. And I think your concerns were the natural resource implications, and that's why this has been continued. So I apparently got an earlier version of the Planning Commission agenda, and it was a bit different than what we have in terms of Greater Oregon City Watershed Council. One of them had a listing of plants that we were going to have at the Abernathy Creek Park. I'm going to point out a couple things and I'll make specific comments. And had I seen this before, I would have called in. But you have listed as Exhibit 1E, Greater Oregon City Watershed Council Watershed Action Plan. And you have also as Exhibit 10, the same plan. And I'm just wondering if that is an error, if you have two different attachments there?
There's
I think
an
we only
action
have one plan.
There's an action plan and an assessment.
right.
Yeah, but well, wait a minute, but at the go to the front page there, you have the action plan listed as 1E, and the action plan also listed as 10.
Well, the difference is 1E is a capital A in action and 10 is a small a in action. So they're clearly different things.
I see. I'm pretty sure the plans are, I hope the plans are the same. I'm not aware we have two different action plans.
Shall we take a quick look at the?
Yeah, if you would, and I want to make sure that those, if there's two different things addressed there in 1E and 10.
The first page appears the same on both.
I have the Exhibit 9 is the assessment report.
Yeah, that's different. I'm talking about 1E and 10. I'll come back to 9 once the clarification's made.
Okay, yes, those are the same thing. And
Okay, that's fine.
that is
And as I said, if I had seen this earlier, I would have called it in, and my intent was not to embarrass anybody.
No, they were, so it's an attachment to two different documents, that's why, so it's
Oh, okay.
Exhibit 10
I guess
is
that's
an
what David
exhibit
might have been
to,
So, but they are the same thing.
they are the
Okay,
same
that's
thing.
fine.
And then Exhibit 9 is
the
the assessment report.
Yeah.
So there are only two documents. The
Right.
reason that the watershed action plan is.
That's fine, you don't have to go any further.
Yeah,
That's
it's
all
an
I have to hear.
exhibit for two different.
Now, Exhibit 9, I have a question. Is this the assessment that John Runyon made? You see the authorship?
Exhibit 9,
Yeah. The
let me
assessment.
pull it up.
It's ICF.
Prepared for.
An assessment was done by John
contact
Runyon.
John
I'm just trying to
Runyon.
find out if that's the same
Yes,
thing.
yes.
Okay. Now, I want to make a specific comment on the assessment plan. There was an assessment done in 2016, and that'll be the plan that you have. There's a subsequent assessment done in 2017 that we have not seen. The comments I wanted to make as it applies, I think, to what's before you is that we had several locations where data loggers that logged the temperature of water in the watershed, the overall Abernathy watershed, were done. The one we have the report on, the three lowest points were Holcomb Creek, above the confluence of Holcomb Creek and Abernathy Creek, and just above those confluences, and one in Newell Creek Canyon. Those are the ones that might be relevant in terms of anything dealing with this. The thing is, the one on Newell Creek was stolen, and so we never got results from that. And the new one we may have information on that, but we won't have it. We don't have it at this point. I think the thing that I would make a request of is this, that that assessment was based on water temperatures specifically. At the last meeting, one of the things that I saw there was a picture of the Newell Creek Canyon, Newell Creek, where the waters were coming in from various sides down into that area. And I understood those were ODOT photographs. And I think it was showing the same area, but the culverts were a different position, so I assume the pictures were taken. And it looked like the most recent one, there had been a lot of riprap put in. I think our concern of the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council would be, if the developments come into effect, is it going to result in an increase of water flow during stormwater events? And that, I think, would be our number one concern. And I think we have to look at other things in addition to riprap if that's the case. Now, really, the only request I have is that Great Oregon City Watershed Council was not invited to comment on these two projects you're talking about, Beaver Creek one and the Redmond one. As the development comes up, we would request to be to look at the plans, but I'm going to make additional requests. One, it goes to the Natural Resource Committee of Oregon City as well. That it goes to Metro, since it almost all those lands on Newell Creek Canyon. And also because Newell Creek Canyon is in your urban reserves, it's not in your urban growth boundary. And I would suggest that the Soil and Water Conservation District of the county also become to have discussions about the impacts of the projects on Newell Creek. And that's my recommendation.
I had made an assumption that had already occurred. I had made an assumption that had already occurred.
Well, I don't think you've got the specifics of the plan in terms of the impact of the stormwater into Newell Creek Canyon.
Well,
How much is there going to be a greater volume?
That's what
I asked. Were any of those organizations, I mean, I know they weren't, but was Soil and Water Conservation District consulted on this?
Not specifically, and I think the reason for it is, we have this concept of a right turn merge lane. This is the project that would be triggering future natural resource overlay district review. So until we're in a position to, I think, start designing that
That's
and
right.
planning it, we have, there's not anything to discuss, not any plans to
Yeah.
look at, but.
And
so
I
that's
assume that was the
future.
case.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would add that the Natural Resource Committee, Metro, and the county, although I'm not sure about the Soil Conservation
Well,
District,
they're a special district, so they wouldn't have been on your list.
they do get all land use applications.
Yeah, but so SC, Soil and Water Conservation District is a separate entity, so they should be on the notice list.
Yeah, I can't remember if they are or not, but at least Metro and NRC is.
Question for you, Doug. When did you say the newest assessment was? What year is it?
2017.
2017.
Well, but the year before, you said there was a 2016?
2016, we have the assessment for. We
Okay.
don't have the one for 2007.
Because the record has 2010. We do not have the 2016.
No, we don't have a copy of it either.
Then, okay. You
Seems
think,
like that
did
we
you say it was John Runyon?
Yeah.
No, that's an error then. It's 2016.
We need to have the
I
latest
would presume,
assessment.
unless you're talking about John Runyon's assessment on something else.
No.
John Runyon, April 2010 is the date on this document.
Was it to the Greater Oregon City Watershed?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like we need the
Well, we've got two assessments in 2016,
We need the
that's done. and-
2016 assessment. The
Okay, 2016
assessment's way
assessment,
out of
and
date
then-
then.
Doug, when were you treasurer? When were you treasurer?
I was never treasurer.
Yeah.
I was never treasurer.
You're
You-
listed as
no,
treasurer
You're
in
listed
this
as the
document.
treasurer of the Greater Oregon Watershed
Boy, I
Council.
don't remember doing anything for it, but yes, that would have been a long time, that would have been a long time ago.
We can certainly add documents to the
Yeah.
record as it goes to city
Right.
commission as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. I would recommend doing so.
Okay.
All right.
As I said last time, thank you, Doug, for that. Yeah, if there's a 2016 assessment, it needs to be, I'm concerned that the 2016 assessment may have an impact on what the findings are. That would be my biggest concern, and my big issue is goal 5.
Well, I'm going to repeat, the 2016 assessment was basically assessment of water temperatures.
Which is a different assessment, potentially.
Yes, but it could also impact this. Okay, so we are gonna get that 2016 assessment,
We'll get it and add it to the record.
and I would just scan it to make sure that there's no additional findings that are needed for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Is there anybody else who wants to testify on this particular item?
Mike?
Mike's probably tired already. Okay, then I will close the public hearing on this particular item. Where are we going, gentlemen?
Home.
Well, you can after you make some sort of decision
Well,
on this.
to me, the only question is, do we keep the record open until we see the 2016 assessment and its impact?
Yes.
Or do we forward the record with the recommendation that the 2016 assessment be attached in time for the city council? In fact, it has to be, because we now know it exists, for them to make the final decision based on the impact of the 2016 versus the 2010.
Yeah, but they're relying on us to make that determination. I don't think they want to deal with that.
I like the latter.
I always get former and latter
I like the
mixed up.
former.
One or two.
I like the middle one.
I'm
There
confused.
was no middle one. Okay, well, I'm going to move that we continue this for the addition of the 2016 assessment only, and that we check that out to make sure that there's no changes, and that we will vote on this at our next meeting. It should only take about 5 or 6 minutes.
March 26th?
Yep.
Second.
Commissioner Henkin,
I was actually going to give you a little more time
Aye.
on that.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe,
Aye.
Commissioner Guile,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy.
Aye.
Chair McGriff.
Aye.
I suspect based on what he said, the assessment's gonna be significantly smaller since. it
And we're
was-
after the 10 o'clock as
Yeah,
well.
so if there's any urgent communications, okay, I motion we adjourn.
I have
Yeah.
one action item.
Let him get his one thing in, and then we can adjourn.
Um, And that is, in regard
Yeah.
to
Hospital,
the
all sorts of
veterans
things.
home.
Let's not talk about it because it's in before the planning commission.
All I'm asking is, because it's part of the planning commission, is what are the pros and cons of flipping the parking lot and the building?
But let's,
I'm just
I hear
letting,
ya.
I'm letting you know I'm gonna ask that question when it comes up. So now you're prepared for.
We already asked that question last time.
Well, but you said, no, we can't, because it's an MUC, but I wanna know more than, we can't, it's not an MUC. And that's fine. You're prepared for it now, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the only thing I just, like I said, I got this from our last meeting. I thought you guys might find it interesting. You can read it at your leisure or not. That's all it was. It wasn't information for anything that we're doing right now. It just was interesting, and I thought.
And it's public information.
Yes, and I thought you might find it interesting. So we have a motion, so I move that we adjourn. By Zach.
And it was seconded by Vern.
And thirded by you, so we are now officially adjourned.